Halloween
forever.
In nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sancti. Oh, hey, everybody. Didn't see you there. Welcome to Halloween is Forever, the show where we pick a topic and listen to three mutant horror nerds rip each other's guts out on the way to deciding whose favorite flick reigns supreme. I'm Brian.
I'm Megan.
I'm Steve.
And how did you guys feel about that intro? Very topic specific.
I actually I don't mind it. I don't mind it, but I also
Should
at the
we
same
do
time
every
I'm
episode?
I'm just like, why do you do this to me? Because I never know. And I'm kind of here for it. I'm totally here for it.
Maybe we just do every episode. We just start it with some sort of cryptic Latin prayer, I think.
Are we going to start a Satanist cult in our area? Is that what's going to happen?
I've been trying. All these squares out here don't want to party with Satan, and it's pissing me off so bad.
Man, what a perfect day to be talking about this.
I know. I'm looking outside. It's kind of rainy, thunderstorm going on outside. It's getting a little creepy, little ooky, spooky out there. But in case you didn't listen to the last episode, and I don't know what the fuck you're doing if that's the case, we are going to do religious horror. That's our topic for today. This is episode number 2, by the way. Main show episode number 2. We cranked out a few mini-sodes between this show and our episode number 1 topic, which was summer camp slashers. But as we talked about in the last show, we're doing religious horror. And if you listen to that show, you already know what movies we're doing and maybe even got an opportunity to check out 1 or 2 or 3 of them. But first of all, if you haven't listened to the other episodes, you didn't catch the Summer Camp Slashers episode, I'll explain real quick what we're going to do. We selected a topic. The first episode, we picked the topic. The second episode number 2 that we're currently in, we picked 3 random topics. And then we put it out to our friends on social media and listeners and everyone, and kind of took a little poll. Said, what do you want of these 3 topics for us to do? And the winner by the slimmest of margins was religious horror. So we picked on the last show. We talked about the movies we're going to do. What did you guys think? I know there were a number of first time watches among us. For me, I'll say. Emotionally draining. Specifically for you two shitheads, the movies you picked were just brutal.
Yes. Good.
Like I said, I'm always going to say I'm going to bring the pain. You know?
Emotionally draining and or just mind twisting, I guess is a good way to say it.
No, I was pretty stoked on it.
Yeah,
because I've seen parts of Exorcist III, but I think I actually came into it almost when shit got real on Exorcist III. So this was my first time like beginning to end, which was dope. And then obviously A Field in England was just a good mind fuck.
Meg, I know nobody can see you but us right now, but you holding the mic, sunglasses, pointing at us while talking with a cigarette in your hand, you look like Charlie Kelly with the with all the things on the wall with the string and everything.
Hey guys, so let me tell you.
Yeah, if you had like a tie and your collar undone and that would be perfect. But
I guess maybe we're gonna have to start video recording these two.
We probably will at some point, especially when we do it in person, because I imagine somebody's gonna hit somebody with a hanging vertical suplex or something like that as we discuss these things.
I'll bring the table, guys.
Yeah.
How else do you get to take the belt home?
That's true.
I'm just wondering when we're officially going to have a belt made.
Listen, guys, update on the belt. I want it to be made from only the finest materials and precious metals. So I've got the order in. Materials are backed up, as we know. Supply chains all screwed up. So that's where we're at with the belt. But it is going to happen at some point, I promise. Eventually we're going to have a physical belt. But Yeah. So again, religious horror. And for those of you who didn't listen to episode 1, we're each going to talk about our movie that we selected. We're going to just kind of do an overview, some fun facts, that sort of cool stuff. And then we'll talk about why we think our film should reign supreme. And then at the end, we'll all vote. We'll decide, did anybody change their mind and truly think one of the other two films were deserved to win? And If not, we vote on our number 2, and then we go from there and figure out who's going to reign supreme. We only did one last time, and it was pretty clear cut. We all voted for our own movie. Neither of you voted for mine, so I got to be the tiebreaker. And then you voted for each other's for second, so yes. I got to be the tiebreaker. And Meg took it home in episode number 1. So we shall see what happens right now. As you can see, a lot of fanfare.
I'm humble, guys. I'm real humble.
She's marching each corner of the ring, holding her belt up at all 4 corners of the ring right now.
This is my house, also. Let's just say that.
You know what though? Of the 2 of us, I am the one repping the Stone Cold though. Speaking of
nice.
What beers are you drinking? I'm drinking Steve Austin's Broken Skull IPA.
What?
At least 60% because Stone Cold said so.
What?
Yeah. I'm slightly triggered by that beer solely because literally right before the pandemic, I had tickets to go see WWE Monday Night Raw on March 16th, where they were going to have Stone Cold, The Undertaker. It was going to be a stacked lineup, and I'm a little bit sad about that still. But anywho, no, I'm really excited.
Yeah. And they did ship in a whole shitload of that El Segundo beer for the event, specifically in Pittsburgh, because then you could, like, JR's picked up a lot of the leftover.
So you're saying is that's what Brian's still drinking?
No, this one's fresh. This one was just packaged like 6 weeks ago. Nice. So this one's actually in pretty darn good shape. A little bit more than that, like 7-8 weeks ago. So it's still well in code. And it was cold. I got this at Creekside, and it's drinking real nice.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
What are you guys drinking? Anything fun?
I am, like I mentioned on one of our last episodes, that in my obsession for Wayfinder, that I picked up a box from the 6 Most Metal Breweries X Knotfest collaboration beer box, and I decided to go with a little more in the monitors by Broken Goblet, which is a Kolsch style ale. And you know what? I'm kind of here for it. Almost like has a little bit more of like an American hop character, which I was like, okay, it's not what I was expecting, but I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. But I love the name and I love the art and it's fun.
You've been fucking with Kolsch's lately. This is not the first episode you've been drinking a Kolsch. Am I wrong about that? Because I remember at one point specifically using the phrase Kolschy boy. So that's the only reason I remember that.
Well, maybe I'm becoming a Kolschy girl.
Yeah, perhaps.
Kolschy ghoul? Can I be called a Kolschy ghoul?
Kolschy ghoul. Okay, there you go. That's a t-shirt. Go. Mark it down. What do you got, Steve? Anything fun?
I'm actually not on the beer tonight because I was on the beer last night. We did the beer for the Hop Nation podcast.
Oh, that's right. You guys did a show last night.
But I'm drinking something a little different. It's the see if we can get it on the camera. Nope.
Is that the hop tea?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a sparkling hop tea by Hoplark.
I still haven't had that. I
haven't either, but I've heard good things.
I have too. Meg, I think you told me good things actually.
It's not bad. It's this one's the black tea version, and it's hopped with Simcoe and Citra. I don't know. I don't notice a whole lot Simcoe wise. It's not very piney. Yeah. Like I was expecting like almost like a real piney West Coast tea. Yeah. But you just get a lot more of the black tea and kind of the citrus citra notes from it. But,
yeah. That's cool. I haven't had it. Where do you find it? Like, where is it around? Do they have it at like beer, like places that sell beer? Because is it NA or what? Is it just hop tea?
It's NA. But I actually got this from my friend Dennis at First Sip Brew Box because they were featuring them in their subscription box
Dennis?
for the month, and so he just gave me some as a sample. But
that's cool. I feel like they started getting advertised to me. But I've also seen other things like hop water, but it's like more of like a seltzer. So it's like the LaCroix for the beer people who don't want to get fucked up.
Yeah, right. I think Lagunitas was making that hop water for a minute. I don't know if that's the one you've seen, but
no, it's not. It's a different one.
I had the Lagunitas one because it's in a clear bottle. Weirdly enough, like it's funny to put like a seltzer in a clear bottle. But, it was all right. Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't know if I'd be drinking it by the case, but 1 or 2 is not
I've seen a lot of people do like dry January and they'll drink that or something like that.
That's what weed drugs is for. Dry January is weed month. I don't know why I'm pretending that I do Dry January anyway, but yeah. So, ooh, a little strike of thunder. Ooh, do you guys hear that?
It's getting a little. Brian over here.
Yeah, I got a little spooky strike of thunder over here, just in time to start. Actually, before we jump into the movie, let's talk about, since we're already on the topic of beer, let's talk about our beer pairings for the movie. Do we have an idea? Anybody got an idea for what they wanted to pair the beer for? I can go first, if yins are not opposed to that.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So as a reminder, so for those of you who didn't listen to the last mini-sode, the movie I chose is 1990's Exorcist Part 3. There's not a, spoiler alert, not a ton of exorcism in Exorcist Part 3. There is a kind of pseudo, attempted, botched, and then saved exorcism, I guess, of sorts at the end of the movie. But what I chose was a throwback beer from Russian River Brewing Company, Damnation. I mean, come on, we're talking about, inevitably, we're talking about souls. We're talking about them being damned to hell. We're talking about them potentially saved in all three of these movies in some capacity or the other. And besides the name, I mean, it's like, kind of slightly funky, really fruit forward, dry, like really well attenuated, moderately high ABV, like Belgian golden ale type of thing. But it's got a cool name and it's got a cool logo on it. And it is a beer that nobody talks about. I remember when I first started really getting into beer, this was like anything Russian River was like a whale, right? This is the stuff we traded for when we were in college and stuff like that. So like, this is very much 2005, 2006 whale territory. Like, we were chugging this beer, watching fucking Homestar Runner or something, and just digging on. I mean, I don't even know. I was thinking about this today because I was trying to come up with a beer to pair with it. Do like beer nerds that are in their like 20s? I mean, I'm a 36-year-old man going on like 66. Do like young beer nerds now even know about Russian River? Like, if you said Consecration, would they even know? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know if I want to know the answer to that.
Yeah, like that was the shit. Like, Russian River, they're still fantastic. Obviously, they haven't gone anywhere. They're still making world-class beers, and like, but like, we used to saw off our fucking foot to trade for a Consecration. You know what I mean? I
just I like that you talked about, like, even when, because I mean, we're not super close to age. I don't know how old you are or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah. I'm about to be 36.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm 33. So yeah, we're close enough.
Yeah, I thought we were close.
Yeah. So, but what I was thinking about is, like, when I first I was moving out to Oregon to go to school, I had went to all the beer stores there. So, but again, I was, early 20s and didn't really know much about beer still there. I was working at a brewery, just like in packaging and stuff, still learning and exploring. But when I went to visit the school, that's when I discovered Russian River, because I was out west, and I was like, holy shit, this was, again, one of those beers that changed your life. So I'm glad that you're talking, because I feel like I felt the same way, but I didn't always experience that. And it was just like, okay, you're either going to get the whales and you're going to get the super funky, weird stuff, or you're going to get the most bitter IPA with the most IBUs that you could ever.
Oh yeah, it was Pliny was like, and it still is, but back then it was like that was the original, like, in search of post on Beer Advocate, was everyone in search of Pliny the Elder, and so the thing that impresses me so much, and I've been fortunate enough to visit Russian River, I think 3 times, and every time the beers that impress me the most, because they're like pioneers of obviously West Coast IPA, they're pioneers of like spontaneously fermented, funky American wild ale type of things, but one of the best dry Irish stouts, one of the best American blonde ales, one of the best Cal Commons I've ever had in my life has also been at Russian River. Like, this stuff that is just like what people would think of as like more pedestrian styles are so fucking impressive there. So I'm gushing about Russian River. Yeah, I feel like I just went back 15 years.
This is a new segment. Who are we gushing over this week? Because I'm definitely with you.
Throwback gush. Here we are. Until Ric Flair comes out with a beer, I'm going to keep gushing about this El Segundo Broken Skull IPA as well. Actually, I mean, it's just like a pretty mediocre IPA, but it's fucking Steve Austin IPA, so I'm fucking with it. All right, who wants to go next?
So I'll go next. For those who don't know, I picked the film A Field in England, and we're talking throwback styles and we're talking throwback beers. And so, because the movie takes place, back in the 1600s, I'm picking an old English brewery, Samuel Smith's.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go with the Samuel Smith Organic Chocolate Stout. I think that's such a classic style. And I don't know if people, our age know how good that brewery is. They seem to get overlooked, but that's
definitely the brewery for people in our 30s now that were like, man, back in my day.
Yeah. Probably the first stout I ever had, because I remember my uncle bringing a little like holiday variety pack, or not variety pack, one of those like gift packs to like a Christmas or Thanksgiving gathering at my grandparents' house, and he had an oatmeal stout. He had the chocolate stout, and then one, I don't remember what else was. I think a Yorkshire Stingo maybe or something. And I was going like, what are you? I mean, I was probably 14, I don't know, and we were like, what the fuck are you drinking? It looks like motor oil. And he's like, yeah, this is the best beer, kind of like, he's the fancy guy at the table drinking the fancy beers. And we took a sip of it, and I was like, oh shit, that's so good. and we drank that all the time in college, that and the oatmeal stout, and we drank those in college all the time. And we had friends who were like fish heads, and like, followed fish around, and that's like part of fish culture, I think, isn't it? The oatmeal stout isn't Sam Smith's oatmeal stout like part of like fish culture? I don't know anything about it.
Are you just making the association because they like probably like bathe with oatmeal? They're like, let's make our breakfast and then let's just put it all over our body.
I don't know. Shout out fish head listeners out there. Let us know what the fuck's going on with fish and the oatmeal stout. Yeah, I swear, like Sam Smith oatmeal stout is like a thing with, maybe I'm getting Grateful Dead and Fish mixed up. I'm pretty sure they're the same
for some reason, I think you're right, Brian. And I think it also has to deal with the organic name in the label.
Maybe, might be.
They might have been like one of the OGs as well, you know.
Well, the brewery's one of the oldest breweries in England. So the fact that it was like an early import into America and it had that organic name on it, I think it actually did get picked up by that crunchy crowd, man.
Yeah. They definitely like... There's like, it's not just, it's like Faygo and Insane Clown Posse. Like, I feel like it's kind of, it's maybe not that level. They're not like bathing in it and shit, but like it is, Faygo is to juggalos as Sam Smith oatmeal stout is to fish fans, I think.
Can we make this a thing if it's not a thing?
This is the thing is, listen, if we're completely wrong and off base on this, like, I'm not that worried about fish fans coming and whooping my ass over this. They're pretty mellow crowd, right?
Right.
I just hope someone hears it, and regardless of what group they're with, they're like, yeah, we need to now start pouring beer all over ourselves and compare them like similarly to the Juggalos.
Yeah.
It'd be so amazing.
So what's your pairing?
So I chose Mother, and I felt like I wanted to go with something a little bit more like classic, that was even delicate, if you will, and just like, but also, I'm trying to think, maybe culty in a way. And so I wanted to go with Orval.
There you go. Can't go wrong with that. I would argue Orval pairs with almost any occasion.
That's true. But I even think about like with Orval Day, and then just like with the beer itself, I felt like it was very appropriate. That's my current beer pairing with it. Yeah,
something easy to put down. Something that's got some underlying complexity to it. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So before we start, so Meg, like we said, took home the hypothetical belt, which will exist at some point.
Does it have a pumpkin as like the faceplate?
It should be. Like I said, I'm going to be etching it out of only the most precious metals. So I think we can put whatever the fuck we want on it.
Sick.
So Meg chose the order tonight, or actually she chose to go last, which is a strategic play. A crafty veteran move. So
for all of episode 2.
Yeah. And so we went she's the dirtiest player in the game.
I'm a quick learner.
So, and I went first last time, so she elected Steve to go first. So, the floor is yours, my friend.
Yes, and so just to jump back quickly, a little bit earlier in the episode, we mentioned how at the end we'll be voting, and I'm employing this method for my own strategy. If for somehow we can't figure out a winner by the end of tonight, we will be putting this up on all our social medias.
That's a good idea.
And then the audience,
Boom.
I like that.
The audience will decide. So, follow us on Instagram at Halloween is Forever, Hallow Forever on Twitter, and Halloween is Forever podcast on Facebook.
I like how you guys are so organized, and I'm just here swearing and talking about penises.
Well, you know what it is? It's Steve was going, is Brian going to say the social medias? No, he's a dickhead. He forgot. So Steve's like, I'm going to do his job, which not the first time, won't be the last.
Hey, I got your back, bud. It's a team event.
If in case you haven't figured out yet, how many episodes are we in? 4 or 5 episodes in. Steve's the only one who knows what he's doing.
I think I've aged 50 years in the last few episodes.
Yeah, you're slowly becoming like grizzled, smoking a cigarette. Yeah, by episode 30, you're going to be Mac's mom from It's Always Sunny. You're like,
that's too good.
From young spry Meg to Mac's mom in only 20 episodes.
Hey, anything can happen.
All right.
Anything can happen. Yeah. But I mean, you're already on the porch smoking.
I really don't appreciate you guys talking so much about me smoking cigarettes. I'm like, this is like a PSA to get me to stop. I know.
It was the fact that you were pointing at us with the cigarette hand. That's what did it. Listen, I'm not judging. I'm not judging smoking. But the pointing and with
Dad.
Down,
okay, Dad.
Like 1/4-inch cigarette butt.
It was the threatening motion of it.
Yeah, she's smoking the filters out there.
Throw them away.
Light
a new one with the old one.
All right, let's just jump into it tonight. As Brian mentioned, also, we had my film, which is psychologically taxing, and Meg's film, which is emotionally taxing. So if you...
Yeah, it's so bizarre that Exorcist Part 3 was like the lighthearted romp of the week.
Yeah. It was fun. It was a nice detective story.
Yeah, all right, don't start planting seeds of doubt, you bastard.
With watching in the order of all of these, I'm just curious how many of our listeners are you guys like? How many do you have to go? How many do you called your therapist after this?
Yeah,
right.
Both of your movies ruined my night. I'm just saying that.
Why would you?
I expected that from Meg. I knew that was going to happen, but I had actually seen it before. But I feel like last time I saw it, I'm getting into Meg's movie. I think last time I saw it, I wasn't really paying attention. And this movie, I was like in the dark by myself, and it was just, emotionally taxing.
Yeah, we're going to need like a BetterHelp sponsorship for our listeners, but
we'll have a come to bosom pillow that like,
yeah,
it's okay. It's okay.
Maybe we can get the My Booty pillow. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen those.
What is
I've
it?
Totally
I don't know this.
It's an ass-shaped pillow.
Okay.
I feel like maybe I should buy them. They definitely at one point got advertised to me on the socials.
Yeah.
So
that has something to do with what you typically click on. I mean, it has to, right?
I might be. For sure. I like butts. That's fine.
Listen, I like butts as much as the next guy. Why am I not getting these ads?
As far as what my Instagram,
you will now.
Yeah.
What my Instagram feed looks like on my alt account. Yeah. So I see why, but. Yes, to the film, A Field in England. We're talking 2013, directed by Ben Wheatley. And for anybody who doesn't know, Ben Wheatley is very much, a lot of his films have that experimental nature to them. You have to look at his other films like Kill List, High Rise, and even his latest film, In the Earth, is very, very experimental, and a lot of his films have this nature of he has secret knowledge and he's not telling you what it is. It's very referential to stuff. If you don't know what he's on about, you have to go look it up.
Yeah. There was a couple things where I was like, I feel like I got a lot of the overarching type of symbolism, and I won't get ahead of you, but like there were some things I'm like, okay, I think I know what's going on here. But then there's other things where you're like, how would I have known that unless I looked it up,
exactly
afterwards?
Yeah.
So I like this movie now way more 4 or 5 days after I watched it than the day I watched it. Like I watched it thinking like, you know what? Kind of fuck that movie. Like I wasn't great about it. And then like as the days go on, I'm like, I'm definitely going to watch that movie again.
Yeah. And honestly, I haven't watched it since I originally saw it. And if, like I mentioned on the last mini-sode, I saw it at the Three Rivers Film Fest in 2013 or 2014 when it was premiered in Pittsburgh. And yeah, I haven't watched it since. So going back to it, like it's just such a bizarre film that it will stick with you forever.
It's got to be completely different the second time too.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah. But yeah, just a couple other notes on like who's in the film. You have Reese Shearsmith and Michael Smiley, both actors that appear in other Ben Wheatley films. Michael Smiley, he actually is he's like a big character actor from what I can tell, but you're not gonna
recognize him immediately.
Yeah, you're gonna recognize him, but you might not know his name. But he's in other Ben Wheatley films like Free Fire and Kill List. Reese Shearsmith appears in High Rise with Tom Hiddleston, and they both also have small parts in Shaun of the Dead. And then there's one appearance very early on in the film, very shortly, by Julian Barrett, and who a lot of people will recognize it from The Mighty Boosh as Howard Moon.
I was like, Howard Moon! I was like, it's Howard Moon! Right away, like, and he even kind of talked like him, you know what I mean? It was like, like you're right, he was only in, the first, 5-6 minutes of the movie or whatever. But yeah, it was like, I felt like I was that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's pointing at the screen and you're like, it's Howard Moon! Hey, look!
Yeah, very quick cameo, but it also, he very much is like speaking like Howard Moon.
Well, that's what I said. That's what my note was. This guy sure talks fancy in battle.
Right.
He's like very almost limerickal in the way he's talking.
So, quick breakdown of the plot, and we go to just basically the film occurs. And this is one of the biggest things of the film, which I think is hard for American audiences because we don't know the history of England as well. But the film occurs during the 17th century Civil War. And the Civil War is very much a part of the film and goes throughout the themes, and we'll get into that. But during the 17th century Civil War, there are 4 deserters, and the deserters are partly running from Julian Barrett's character, but they all fall through a hedgerow and decide, and I forgot this plot point of the film, but I thought it was very appropriate for this podcast once I rewatched it. They decide to leave war and go to an alehouse. So they decide to go get a beer instead.
Hey, no shade here.
Yeah.
Beer not war. That's what I always say.
Yeah, exactly. But on their way to go get a beer, it becomes more obvious that one of them in their group, Cutler, has other plans in mind, and they find themselves... the scene is kind of hard to distinguish, but they either rescue or are pulled through to another dimension to find O'Neill, who is very much a alchemic warlock.
Yeah.
We can also get into his history and what he may or may not have on hand. But yeah, O'Neill then finds himself taking power over the deserters. Cutler reveals himself to be in servitude to O'Neill, and O'Neill uses his power as a warlock to try to search for a treasure within this field in England, which is obviously a very supernatural place at the point that we really discover it.
That was one of the parts in that you kind of got this idea this is a different plane, of consciousness or purgatory, whatever it ends up being, right? But the one thing that I was very lost on, and I think I even posted something about it on the Instagram account. And I was like, 25 minutes in, when has this become a horror movie? 26 minutes in, what the fuck is happening right now? It just, because all of a sudden they're in. So the whole idea of like the mushroom circle, right, and having to pull, 4 men in a rope can pull 1 man out or whatever, because the inside the mushroom circle or the mushroom ring or whatever, things happen at a different pace. Like, how would you have known? Like, I know I had to look that was one thing that I had to look up, and like heard Ben Wheatley talking about it in an interview or something like that.
Yeah. So that's specifically references just like English folklore of fairy rings. And, mushroom rings are said to have occurred because of fairies dancing around in a circle. And then if you step into that circle, a number of things can happen to you. Like, you can be cursed, you can die young, you can be turned invisible, or you can be transported into the fairy land. So we kind of see 2 of those things at least occur in that they try to pull O'Neill out of the fairy circle, and he's obviously invisible because they're just pulling on a rope attached to a stone. And then he just comes out of nowhere. But then it's also possible, because of that way that scene plays out, that maybe they actually were pulled into the fairy circle.
Yeah, that's what I was like back and forth about. But because the reason I thought they got pulled in is because that like pole that friend, the character I think they just called it friend, was like kind of admiring or like obsessing over. It was there and then it wasn't.
Right.
So I was like, did O'Neill get pulled through that, or was that in the real world and now they're in this alternate realm or something like that? It's hard to say.
Yeah. And also, just like another side to that is, it's also part of English mythology that hedgerows are also transportations to another realm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So you actually get transported twice in the film. That's why, like, in the beginning of the film, when they fall through the hedgerow and all that, like, nobody can really see them with the exception of Julian Barrett's character.
Right.
And then they just, you hear the war die down behind them. And I believe it's Cutler who says, nobody can see us now. They were just shadows to them.
Yeah.
So,
I tell you what, that was a really clever location, because it did feel like they were on the fringe of battle, even though if you really try to like separate yourself, it's just a few guys on the other side of this hedgerow, like some smoke, kind of coming up or something like that. But the sound, I think it was the sound design that did a lot of that. It really gave you this impression that, they were just right on the fringe of the battlefield. But otherwise, it was like, if you look at the shot, it was super minimalist. You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot going on, but it was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, just to kind of wrap up what the plot of the film and where it leads us, within the original Deserter Party is Reese Shearsmith's character of Whitehead, and Whitehead is a very he's pretentious. He's an educated man. He wasn't meant to go to war, but he was sent to war to find O'Neill, because both he and O'Neill were servants of another alchemic master. Whitehead is sent to destroy O'Neill, but is taken over by him, possessed by him, and forced to search for a treasure within the fairy world, as within this field that's also just a liminal plane, like nobody knows up or down within it.
Yeah.
I can't say, like, when he was like, doing whatever he was doing in the tent, that, quite frankly, with the sounds coming out of it, freaked me the fuck out.
That was a super disorienting scene, that tent scene. And honestly, I still don't fully know what the fuck happened, because this is he just kind of motions him in the tent. So that's what I thought, because he's screaming. They're all like holding their ears in terror. And I'm like, is this like a rape situation? You know what I mean? That's honestly what I thought. And then he comes out like he just gave him a lobotomy.
Right.
So I was like, oh no, he went freaking, Dahmer style, poured acid in his ear or something. And now he's a human freaking, what do they call, what are those rods called that they hold up to like
defining,
go towards
defining rod, or a dowsing rod.
Can one of you guys even like clarify this? Because after that scene, when he ran out and he was just like almost in this like zombie like state, and then he like dropped, but there was blood, and I was like, wait, at first, because I couldn't really see very well, I was like, did he like get his eyes gouged out and now he's just being possessed or something? Right.
Yeah. I literally thought he put like the rod in his eye thing and gave him like a frontal lobotomy. And now he was just operating on some sort of instinct, but then he's good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that's why I was like super. I mean, I get it. He's an alchemist. Like he could have given him any number of like weird, short acting, hallucinogenic, drugs that make him like super suggestible or whatever. But I would be lying if I said I understand what the fuck happened in that scene, because he walks out like grinning like an idiot, you know what I mean, and like stumbling, and then he starts like running with his hands aside like fucking Napoleon Dynamite. I'm like, what is like, but he has some sort of supernatural knowledge or something, because he takes them to at least where he thinks the treasure is. Like it's never really clear whether they find a treasure. They do find like a skull or something, right, or bones or something in there, but like. Then, that takes me to the next time. It's like, whose bones was that? Was that O'Neill finding his own bones and he's in this like judgment area with the rest of them? I don't know. But
yeah. So that scene is purposely kind of left ambiguous. And there's even more theories I've seen beyond that. Like Whitehead has been possessed by some sort of demon that takes them to the treasure. He's used as a vessel in some way. The whole main point, though, is that O'Neill is exercising some sort of force or dominance, which is also kind of why it plays into the rape theme. It's just some sort of force or dominance to make Whitehead, lead them to treasure, but it plays to the character of Whitehead, who has been subservient the entire time. Whitehead is subservient to this alchemic master that we don't know. And he's also very subservient to Christ and Christianity. He kind of gives himself, you see numbers of times him giving himself over to prayer for Christianity, but also like giving himself over to doing his master's wishes.
It's almost to a point of pitying him. You know what I mean? Like he's subservient to the point of like, I think O'Neill says at some point, the line is like something about suggesting that he doesn't even know himself. Like he's been kept, shut off from the world to the point where he doesn't even know himself. So he's almost like this, obviously really intelligent, obviously supernaturally capable in some capacity person that has been kept like almost shackled up away from the world.
Right. And that's the main overarching theme of the film, and what also ties back into the Civil War in England. So the Civil War itself, it lasted from 1642 to 1651, but the whole war was over governance and religious freedom. And in the end, it led to the dissolving of the monarchy in England and kind of the rise of the Commonwealth between England, Ireland, and Scotland. And it also ended kind of the stranglehold that the Church of England held over the people. So you saw the kind of rise of freedom in religion. Because of that, you kind of hit the nail on the head, Brian, of like Whitehead is, ignorant of himself, but is eventually by the end of the film, he is his own man. He is his own master. And you kind of see it with other characters as well. Every character is at a state of ignorance before they reach enlightenment. So it's through, you get a whole lot of different inputs through the film, because you have the obvious mushroom tripping. That's a very real thing that happens to people.
Yeah. That's like the surface level thing. Like you, the first time you watch it, or even 10 minutes past when shit starts to hit the fan, you're just kind of like, oh, everyone's tripping, you know? But then as you go, move beyond that and start to make connections with things you learned in the first, 20, 25 minutes, then you start to realize there's more like something existential happening that is not just
right.
An agency of the drugs,
Yeah, but also they are a real part of kind of the power being exercised. Because at one point Whitehead just decides to consume as many mushrooms as he possibly can, and then you get one of the freakiest like trip scenes that I've seen in film. Just period.
I had to look that up and hear Ben Wheatley talk about it, and the idea of like the rapid switching back and forth between two scenes, because it's not difficult effect to achieve, but what it does to your brain is very very effective.
Yeah. And I've also read like it's one of the reasons why they kept the film black and white, because when that scene comes about and you're forced to kind of reconcile these two images against each other, because a lot of it is pairing O'Neill's visage against Whitehead's, but also like Whitehead reflects on himself a lot, and you see a lot of images of like Whitehead fighting himself in a way. But yeah, the reason why they kept it black and white is because too much color, and then you can't ingest everything that you're being seen. You know, if you had
your brain starts to make adjustments to make sense of something that's happening too fast for it to make sense of. Almost.
Right. But overall the mushrooms kind of facilitate that, but they also facilitate like alchemic power, or you have other references to other religion, like the fairy circle we already mentioned. That's not necessarily a part of a religion, but it's just mythology. And, you know, really what's religion if not mythology is doctrine. Yeah. So, you know, you have, just to kind of jump to the character O'Neill, it's mentioned that he's, you know, an alchemist like Whitehead, but he's kind of an outlaw alchemist.
He's the left-hand path.
Yeah, he really
alchemist,
is.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole reason he's on the run is because he stole these documents from the unseen master, and obviously he's on the search for some sort of treasure. He's been in this fairy world searching for it, but his background, you get that he's an Irishman. So that
there's a great line there, was like, what he said, like, I knew the devil would be an Irishman, or something. Or I'm not surprised that the devil's an Irishman, or something.
Yeah, I'm not surprised the devil's an Irishman, but I didn't think he'd be so tall, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
But so I think it's kind of important that they mention that O'Neill's an Irishman, because that also leads to he may have a descendancy from either Celtic or Druidic Celts. Which lends to another religion of power, and Druids have like been told to have like a number of powers, like divination, and he carries that scrying mirror. And he also like has spell casting abilities, possibly because he threatens to turn Jacob into a frog.
I remember that. Yeah. So what you're saying now, this is coming together, and I didn't think about this when we were watching, between turning people into creatures and being a Celtic druid. What you're saying is he's an ancestor of Colonel Cochrane from Halloween 3.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a prequel to Halloween 3 season of the
it's all the same. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of years separated, but because he possibly has this Celtic druid background, it's not hard to imagine that he would seek out alchemic instruction, and but then also find himself like just turning away from it and taking power from it. The other kind of references to non-Christian religion, but also doesn't fit with the Celtic theme, is in that scene when they finish the dowsing run, as Whitehead is pulling on a rope like a crazed dog. That end is you have O'Neill forcefully pouring wine down Whitehead's throat and kind of breaks his fast. And
so let the devil in,
right?
Line, right? The first time he says that.
So right after that, Whitehead throws up a bunch of stones, and there are a bunch of rune stones. When O'Neill clears the blood off those stones, though, and I stopped the frame just to look at it. The runes on the stones are actually of Norse descendancy.
Oh yeah. See, that part very confused the hell out of me. I did not know what was happening with the stones there.
I still haven't completely figured it out, but like the runes on those stones are of Norse descendancy, and then you can even see on O'Neill's wrist in the same frame that he has like alchemic runes, which are different. And then like even O'Neill admits like he doesn't know what these runes mean.
Yeah.
So he doesn't recognize it. So he doesn't recognize Norse religion and Norse power the same way, and Whitehead doesn't recognize them either. So, and neither of them know how those stones got in there. So possibly somehow
something else at work.
Right. There's something else. I've read that it's possible, like the demon that possessed Whitehead to turn him into a dowsing figure, left them there, and conjured them. Or it's also possible that their alchemic master, put them in there himself to give Whitehead the power to take on O'Neill. And then by throwing up the stones, he lost his power. So yeah.
Interesting. So I had like a I don't want to go off on my own crackpot theories necessarily on the movie yet, but like, I kind of took this stance early on, especially this was the giveaway for me. I took this early on, like stance that I thought that they were in, for lack of a better term, like purgatory, but they were on some sort of plane of judgment, right? This field of judgment in some capacity. And specifically, Whitehead, Jacob, and Friend, and perhaps Cutler. And O'Neill was some sort of like tempting demon or satanic figure. Right, that was trying to assert control over them, that was trying to trick them, that was trying to, and some of the clues were kind of surface level, the let the devil in and all that sort of thing, and the manipulating Cutler, obviously, and that sort of thing. But like, I took it as they all died in battle, like on the field, especially when Friend woke up, right? They thought he was dead. They Whitehead kind of declared him dead in the first few minutes. And then he woke up and was like, where's the ale or whatever, right?
Right.
Which you could have just said like, oh yeah, he was unconscious. And back then, it was hard for them to tell, they didn't have as much, knowledge now. But you should assume that like a learned, alchemist and, he was probably more knowledgeable than even the average, doctor physician in a country town back then, right? You could just make that assumption, would have been able to tell if the man was dead, right? And then he pops up and he's good. And then, of course, Friend is resurrected, I think, 3 times, right? Throughout the thing. So I kind of took that as like they were all there before and they were going through this like cyclical thing, because the other kind of giveaway for me was they all had some sort of like sin on their shoulders or lack of faith, or they had in some capacity forsaken their faith or whatever. Obviously Jacob was very much on the, I'm my own man, I do whatever the fuck I want type of thing. Whitehead obviously was struggling with his faith and, even, willingly drinking the wine at one point. So you were thinking that. And then of course, Friend, gives a pretty explicit a description of his infidelities with his wife's sister or whatever. So like they all like quote unquote deserve to be in judgment in some capacity, but they all seem to know each other or have at least some sort of like deeper connection to one another than you would expect from just strangers who just met a few hours ago. You know what I mean? Like when Friend gets shot and Jacob is like destroyed by it. And he was literally just fighting him a second ago, like trying to strangle him. And then he's destroyed when he dies. Like it made me seem like they have lived this scenario multiple times over, trying to learn from whatever was supposed to be happening or whatever they were supposed to be learning so that they could progress on to like the next plane or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess there is like a little bit of, you can draw that kind of conclusion of it's a cyclical event because they find the bones in that hole. And then
that's what I thought. Was that O'Neill looking for his own bones or somebody else's? You know what I mean? That's what I thought initially. But then I thought maybe he was a demon or something. But
then at the end, Jacob and Friend also are buried in that hole. So you can kind of maybe draw that, they keep discovering the same bodies and bones over the same time. I think the main thing they're trying to achieve, though, is that there is no treasure. There never was. The treasure is finding that enlightenment And like I believe Whitehead even explicitly says like there is no treasure. The treasure it was between us, and it's meant to be like the sharpening stone of just kind of enlightenment from each other to throw off the bonds of tyranny and throw off like the control of religion.
Yeah.
So
okay, that makes sense.
That's kind of the way I read it, because like at the end, you have Whitehead destroying O'Neill and escaping through the hedgerow, and then when he gets on the other side of the hedgerow, Friend and Jacob are there,
right?
And so
and he's Van Helsing.
Yeah, and he's Van Helsing. It's like in a way, because I mean O'Neill's already a freed man from being an outlaw. So in a way, Whitehead takes up the mantle of O'Neill by being his own free man, but his goals and his deeds and his intention is not to be as tyrannical and controlling. So he's still a freed man. He's still outside of societal norm, but also he isn't going to be as destructive. He's more for brotherhood. Because as you see the way he behaves with Friend and Jacob, he's always helping them. He's like curing Jacob's dirty penis. He's trying to
you get a real close shot of his diseased dick, and that came out of nowhere.
But
it's like boom, diseased dick right in your face.
But then you see the relationship between Cutler and O'Neill, and it's very servitude. It's O'Neill's constantly abusing Cutler, kicking him when he's down, forcing him to do work. Like there's no give and take between the two of them. It's just just complete destruction, and that's why they wind up stuck, in the field. And just die in the field, and they're not on the other side because they learned nothing. They were only in it for selfish enrichment.
Yeah. No, that's like very, like I said, so I didn't necessarily do like the shaking off of tyranny, but that makes a lot more sense considering the Civil War aspect of it. That kind of ties in some of like the political, socioeconomic other things going on with the historical aspect, because my thought was like they all had kind of like overcome some degree of like, for lack of a better term, like selfishness, and kind of like learn to like care for each other and like help one another, because like at their heart at the beginning they were all cowards. They were all like running away, but like at the heart of cowardice, right, is self-preservation kind of thing. And they ultimately decided that they were going to like act on behalf of somebody else in some capacity. But yeah, it ties in closer with the historical context. Right. I think the way you kind of played it out. But listen, all I know is I have developed a kinship with Jacob because I have accidentally tried to take a shit in some Jagger bushes before, and suffered the wrath. So I felt his pain. But
that's funny.
Yeah, it was I said watching it the whole way. Like my notes are hilarious. I took way too many notes, and at one point I'm like, "Fuck this movie. This is pretentious as hell." Some of the music choices drove me nuts. And I'm like, this is like pretentious art house bullshit. And by the end, I'm like really getting into picking things apart. And like I said, a few days later, I'm still thinking about it. So my tone changed throughout watching it, and even more dramatically so well after I watched it, like days after I watched it.
Yeah. So like, I think when I originally watched it, I very much had kind of a similar take away that you did, Brian, that I just kind of thought they were all dead and, they came back or something like that. And it was just overly metaphorical. And then like a couple days later, I was reading about it and, I felt better about it. And then like, even on this rewatch and then I had to go back and reread again. But I feel like I have a better grasp on the film. And I don't know, I appreciate it a lot more. But yeah.
Let's not mince words. It is over metaphorical.
Oh God, yeah. Like it's experimental, it's metaphorical. Like I understand why people will hate this film, but hopefully I'm hoping that through all this explanation and context that I can win the hearts and minds.
Yeah. It is. Listen, I'm glad I watched it. And this is a testament to it because I do want to watch it again. To kind of like pick some of those things out because like it's gonna take you to a place after the first watch, and you're gonna like pick up on certain things and make certain connections, and then I'm sure the second time you watch it, you kind of do a little bit more of the same. But yeah, there was definitely a few parts where I'm like, how long are they going to dig? Like, how long are they going to like eat mushroom broth? Yeah, there was just like, I wouldn't call it a fun watch, but it was an interesting one, and it was a really interesting one to ruminate on afterwards for me personally. But
I mean, honestly, listening to you guys talk about it way more than I didn't even interject at all because I felt very confused even afterwards. So I mean, I think also coming from a non-religious background of whether or not you guys are or not, but like even the context and like stuff I like looked up, I think I saw it through this lens of like even some level of like spirituality where I got some of the things you were talking about. Like, yes, I'm picking up on this, but putting it all together isn't really coming around. So I'm curious, like after hearing you guys talk and interject that I feel like it would be a different watch for me for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, it is not a paint by numbers metaphorical thing. It is I mean, and this is like and this is the only Ben Wheatley movie I've seen, but from hearing Steve talk about it, and like I said, I watched a couple interviews with him on YouTube. It seems like this is his MO, is be just incredibly vague, leave a ton up for interpretation, and you kind of take, I don't want to say you take what you want from it, but there's a lot of connecting the dots that has to be done, and you wonder how much he intended. Because when you hear an interview with him, he's still pretty vague. Like he'll give little like clues to talk about it, but you wonder how much is tied up with a little bow in his brain and how much is intentionally vague so that you draw your own. I mean, obviously it's intentionally vague, but I mean like how much does he not even necessarily know what he meant by it? You know what I mean?
And like, I think a real direct, obvious thing about that is going back to those rune stones that have the Norse symbols on them. I couldn't find anybody that had any sort of translation on them.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. When you said that, it reminded me of the scene in Forgetting Sarah Marshall where he's like, that's a different culture, that's a different culture, none of this shit makes sense, you're an asshole. Like that's
so, but like I assume that possibly Ben has some sort of translation. Maybe it's like just an inside joke or something, but like he never speaks about it. So I don't know. I never.
But I feel like I could totally see there being something there. Just thinking of like, we're talking about alchemy and talking about even Norse legend. I mean, their whole shit was partially related to this. So like, there has to be something there that I'm sure someone who knows more about Norse, the mythology, as well as rune reading as well. I mean, $20 says some of those runes coupled together probably means something very specific. So, hey, if we have any of those rune readers out there, hit us up.
So I even went on, like, I found like a Norse alphabet just to see if I could quickly translate it. And it comes out to I would Dorthin. So it's not
Brad Dorff.
Yeah, exactly,
is that what you said? Yeah, because we're about to.
Yeah, there's no direct translation, and like some of the runes are backwards, so I assume that means something different. But I couldn't make a direct translation myself. So
I love that stuff, and I love picking apart little things and like pulling out meaning from them or extracting meaning from them in almost like a mystery type, kind of solving the mystery type of way. But like I would say this movie for me was right on the borderline of like doing that to a masturbatory level where it was like it was truly like I mean, you get it. It's an art house movie through and through. Like, there's no mincing words with that. But yeah, it was just like, especially, like I said, the music choices for whatever reason, like really hammered that home to me. And it was well constructed and the performances were great. Like, there was no two ways about that. So,
Just one more interesting note about that. But I will agree with what you just said, Brian. It's like this film solely relies on, is it well constructed enough for you to want to do all this secondary investigation that like I did and you looked into as well? Is it well constructed enough to make you want to do that? But interestingly, the film was only shot in like 12 days, because like you think of how simple, the set is. It's just literally a field and they have minimal dressing as far as just like O'Neill's camp. And you see a lot of the same backgrounds. You see the hedgerow pop up, time and again. But yeah, it was shot just like in 12 days, so they were able to get it done.
This is like that classic like art house movie, I want to say trick, but like method of like taking a restrictive setting and in this case also adding like supernatural elements, adding psychedelic elements to it, and just the fact that it's in a restrictive setting actually like broadens the potential scope of the narrative infinitely. So it's like the old, like, one-man show type of thing, or you know what I mean? Or like, hey, this movie is just two people sitting on folding chairs talking to each other. And you can make that into literally whatever you want because all of a sudden everything means something in that super restrictive setting. So I'm not opposed to those types of movies. Like I said, I like those types of movies, but like, yeah, it's not a light watch.
No.
It's by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But, so I guess in summation, like if you kind of like this film and you're looking for other things, I say check out Ben Wheatley's new one, In the Earth. I would say like that film is in shared universe with this one. And then to what you're saying, Brian, Welcome to Dogville is also or I think it's just Dogville. But it's another film that uses a very art house approach of a very small setting. It's almost like a stripped down play. And, that's something that I kind of noticed about all three films that we're doing tonight. All three could actually be adapted to the stage pretty well for how minimal they are. Yeah. So, yeah. Like a lot of single locations with us tonight, with the exception of Exorcist III. You have the dream scene, but then it's hospital and then lots of monologues. So it could also be a play, I think, pretty easily.
There's only a couple set pieces you could get it done, right?
But, that's my defense of a field in England.
Bold choice. You always can count on Steve for the bold choices. I liked this one. I mean, honestly, I don't want to say I liked it more than because we were saying your last pick in summer camp slashers was also unorthodox. It was like a new movie, and you know what I mean. And I like that one a lot. But like I said, this one is like, if somebody said quick gut reaction, thumbs up, thumbs down, I'd be like thumbs up. But if you asked me during the movie, even the night I watched it going to bed, I would have probably said thumbs down. And now 3 days later, I like it again. Like I like it. It took me 3 days to like the movie.
No, I can definitely see you going to bed mad on this film.
I watched it and I was like, no, I wasn't mad, but I was just like, oh God, it's over. Thank Christ. You know what I mean? And then like, I'm laying in bed kind of thinking about it, kind of not, whatever. And then, like I said, 3 days later, I'm still thinking about it, but Fun pick. Not a movie I would, like I said, it's been on my to watch list, but frankly, it was going to keep getting pushed down the list. So I'm super happy you picked it because I'm glad I watched it, but I probably wouldn't have watched it on my own unless I was super stoned. And then probably would have lost interest in super stoned, frankly. I would have been like, ooh, shiny things on Instagram. So yeah, let's take a little break and then we'll be back with you in a second and we'll talk about The Exorcist III. All right, let's hop back into it. I am going to go next because I said Meg has strategically decided she's going to bring up the last and poke holes in everything we've said and then come back and just execute us at the end. Yeah,
it's either going to work in my favor or not.
So I'm gonna jump in here. So again, my film is Exorcist Part 3 from 1990, directed by William Peter Blatty. So before we get into, because I do want to talk a little bit about Blatty, because he has a really, really interesting story and a really interesting childhood, and it speaks a lot to the types of novels that he wrote and eventual screenplay adaptations that he wrote. But I'll do a real quick. This is the IMDb plot synopsis. So a police lieutenant uncovers more than he bargained for as his investigation of a series of murders, which have all the hallmarks of the deceased Gemini serial killer, leads him to question the patience of a psychiatric ward. Boy, that's a bad synopsis. I mean, yes, those are some of the highlight points, but that tells you nothing about what the movie's actually about. Yeah, so just as a little bit of a preface before we get into Blatty, this movie picks up 15 years later after the events of the first film. So it focuses on Lieutenant Kinderman, which is played by the great George C. Scott, and I'll gush about him a little bit. Actually, let's go through some of the kind of stars first of all. So George C. Scott, you would know him certainly from Patton, probably his most famous role. Horror fans would know him from The Changeling, one of my favorite supernatural slow burn horror movies. Everyone knows The Changeling. I think most people are a fan of it. It's a great movie. Dr. Strangelove, an absolute masterpiece. But I grew up knowing him from two things: one, his face, and another, his voice. He was played perhaps the best, if not a top 2 or 3 representation or characterization of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol from 1984-85. My dad is a diehard fan of A Christmas Carol and owns like every version on VHS or DVD or both. So we grew up watching A Christmas Carol. Like starting Thanksgiving Day, we were watching Christmas Carol until Christmas. Like he's got every version of it, and George C. Scott is always one of our favorites. He just adds so much. I mean, he adds so much gravity to any performance, and I'll gush a lot about him as we move on. But the other thing, so he was Scrooge to me growing up until I started getting into Kubrick, and then Dr. Strangelove and all these movies. But the other thing I did not know that I knew him from, but I knew his voice was from the 1990 TV kind of anti-drug, anti-smoking PSA Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue. Do you guys remember Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue?
God, that's such a deep cut.
No. I have it taped still to this day. I have it on VHS taped from probably 1990, 1991 and watched it not that long ago, but it's like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like all these people. So that's why I wanted to watch it, because I was a huge TMNT fan, and still I'm looking at like a painting of the Ninja Turtles as Universal monsters in my office right now. But that's why I taped it, because we were anything with turtles, we were going to watch it. And it's this really weird, really kind of cheesy, but weirdly dark, like after school special classic, like late 80s, early 90s after school special. And he is the voice of the bad guy, that gravelly voice. I think the character's called Smoke. And he's like this gravelly, he's this bad guy who's trying to get the kids to do drugs. So definitely check that out. It'll be a fucking blast from the past if you're anywhere near our age. But but he's like one of the most accomplished and versatile actors in American history, like not hyperbole. Between Patton, The Changeling, this movie, like he can play horror. He can be like just uproariously funny in Dr. Strangelove, not even just the lines, because he kind of plays like the straight man a little bit in the movie, but also like the physicality of his comedy in that movie, like the falling down scene where he like trips on the stairs and stuff are so incredible. He's just a fucking treasure, and I will watch absolutely anything with George C. Scott in it. I'm pretty sure, just hearing like stories about him and behind the scenes type of stuff and reading a little bit about him, like he was a pretty gruff bastard in his lifetime for the most most part. And he certainly knew his worth as an actor. So I think he threw his weight around, literally and figuratively, because first of all, he's just a fucking intimidating guy. He's a fucking mountain of a man. He's just big, barrel-chested dude. He's one of my all-time favorite actors. So he's got a leg up for me right off the bat. Other people in here, Ed Flanders, not Ned Flanders, but remarkably close. Ed Flanders plays Father Dyer, who is the priest, who's friends with George C. Scott's character early on, that is eventually murdered by the Gemini Killer, or the incarnation of the Gemini Killer. He was in, most people probably know him from St. Elsewhere. He's also in The Ninth Configuration, which was the only other movie that Blatty directed. He wrote a book early on that was, and the name's escaping me, but he eventually rewrote it into a screenplay for a movie called The Ninth Configuration, which he directed, which he also was nominated, in addition to this movie, was nominated for, I think this movie he actually won a Best Screenplay Academy Award for, and he was nominated for that movie as well. And if you haven't seen it, it's really great. It's got a lot of the same people in it.
I believe the original book is Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane.
Yes, Killer Kane is one of the characters. Anyway, I don't want to spoil it. You should go watch The Ninth Configuration. I think it was on Shudder at some point. If not, it's streaming out there. It's really, really great. He's also in Salem's Lot, which is one of my favorite all time. TV miniseries / kind of movies. But in any case, Brad Dourif, maybe one of the most underappreciated American actors. People know him from Dune, certainly One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but he's probably most known by horror fans as the voice of Chucky, the killer doll, in the Child's Play series. He also recently played Sheriff Brackett, so Annie's father, in the Rob Zombie Halloween remake. He has been in a fucking million things. His face immediately, but he is really one of those guys that kind of transforms into his part. I also know that he is tied in some way to a new Reanimator property that has been announced, but there's very little details out there about it, that I think is in production right now, which I'm a huge Stuart Gordon fan, huge Reanimator fan, so I'm really excited about that. But he plays the Gemini Killer, which we'll talk a little bit more about, obviously. Jason Miller, which you'll know, of course, from the first movie. He's Damien Karras. He's the young priest in the first, Exorcist film. And then one other notable person to call out, Scott Wilson. He plays the kind of quirky psychiatrist that constantly smokes. His name's Dr. Temple. He was Herschel in The Walking Dead. And he also is the star, one of the main characters in The Ninth Configuration as well, and puts on an insanely good performance in that movie. So that, I could not, I wouldn't. It's not necessarily horror, but it's a really cool, really weird fucking movie that you should definitely check out. But a little bit about. So,
wait, those are the only notable characters? Not Fabio and Patrick Ewing?
We're going to get there. They're certainly notable. Although Fabio, actually, neither of them have lines.
Nope, no lines.
But how did Brad Dourif kill Patrick Ewing and Fabio? There's no fucking way that happened. There's no fucking way. Patrick Ewing, first of all, is an absolute monster of a man. He's enormous. And this is a young Patrick Ewing. This was straight out of fucking Georgetown, almost, Patrick Ewing. He was a brick shithouse.
Well, Brad Dourif didn't kill him. He's actually, he's credited as the Angel of Death.
Oh, Patrick Ewing is the angel. Oh, yeah, he had wings. He did have wings. Yeah. So in that room, I'm assuming the vast majority of those people were supposed to be the Gemini Killer's victims. That's what I took it as. And I've watched this movie 5 times, and I still don't fully understand that scene. But obviously some of them are his victims. Right, the boy, that the first victim in this movie, and then of course Father Dyer. That's when George C. Scott's character. I'm just going to call him George C. Scott because I'm not going to call him Lieutenant Kinderman. George C. Scott. That's the first time he gets the premonition in the dream, and then wakes up to a phone call that Father Dyer's been murdered. And of course, he's got the staple, his head's been cut off. So they have the staple, same thing as the boy from the police club or whatever it was. So I assumed a lot of those people, or at least some of them, had been killed by the Gemini killer. Like some of them are, there's like an angel band,
right?
You know what I mean?
I almost thought that like with seeing like Fabio and stuff like that, I'm like, he looks still perfect. Okay, so I feel like almost maybe they're like the ushers for these angels for all these people that he killed. Is kind of how I took it. And I'm like, I don't know. Fabio's still an angel. He's always an angel for me, but but yeah, no, I think I took it as like, I think I can agree that I definitely think it's like the people who killed, but like almost like George C. Scott's like mind or like whatever premonition that was of like almost like heaven, but like, and so people like the Fabio characters were just like the ushers and the angel ushers or whatever, and then everyone else was just like, here, you just need to know all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, Patrick. Like, if you're gonna pick somebody to be the angel of death, like it definitely helps to pick like somebody who's like 7'2", 350 pounds, you know what I mean? Like a giant human being to be that. But yeah, and Fabio, I guess Fabio is certainly angelic in nature. I mean, I can't argue with that. But in any case, I thought this was really interesting. I was kind of doing a little bit of research on William Peter Blatty. I keep wanting to say William Patrick Blatty, so if I mess that up, it's William Peter Blatty. In any case, he wrote the original 1971 novel, The Exorcist. Also, like I said, the screenplay for the film adaptation. He has a production credit on that. You know, the screenplay won an Academy Award. The film was nominated for Best Picture, first horror movie to ever be nominated for Best Picture. He also wrote and directed this movie, The Exorcist III, as well as The Ninth Configuration. That was his only other directing credit, which that actually won a Golden Globe for Best Screenplay. But the only two films that he directed, most of his stuff was adaptations of novels. He had screenwriting credit on those. So he was raised, this was really interesting. He was raised in what he described as, comfortably destitute or in comfortable destitution by a deeply religious mother. Probably no surprise there based on the stories that he writes. And the sole financial support of the family was from, she made and peddled homemade quince jelly on the streets of Manhattan. And she once was noted for having offered a jar to FDR when the president was cutting the ribbon at the Queens Midtown Tunnel, and told him, and I guess she was quoted in some sort of publication, for when you have company. So that was kind of her claim to fame. She gave a jar of quince jelly to FDR. So he eventually went to a Jesuit school in Brooklyn. He's, extremely intelligent kid, became from a tough socioeconomic background. He went on a scholarship to this Jesuit school, graduated valedictorian of his class, eventually went to Georgetown. No surprise. Obviously, that's a big, location in the movie. And then later to grad school at George Washington University. So he worked a bunch of like menial jobs during school to support himself, and eventually kind of worked in academics for a while. But this is the wild thing. In 1961, he won $10,000 on an episode of You Bet Your Life, the Groucho Marx game show.
Okay.
He won $10,000 on that show, and that was enough for him to quit his job and start his writing career.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, such a bizarre tie-in. So it primarily focused on comedy early in his career, and then kind of resumed fiction. Actually, really, his early writings were super well received by critics, but not really that financially successful. And then he went back to fiction in the early 70s, and of course wrote The Exorcist, which became a New York Times bestseller for like 17 weeks in a row. So huge success, and then he's kind of off and running. But so that movie, obviously the book, huge successes. A few years later, they made Exorcist II, The Heretic. He didn't want to have anything to do with it, hated the movie. For anybody who's seen it, my opinion is it's absolute dog shit. So he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He wrote a direct sequel, which was essentially adapted into the screenplay for this movie that was called Legion in 1983. And he wanted Legion to be, like, he wanted to write the screenplay, direct the movie, and call it Legion. The studio wanted a little more close tie to the first movie, obviously a huge box office hit. But they wanted it connected to the first movie. He wanted it separated from the second movie. Ultimately, the studio won out and they called it Exorcist III. But in any case, like I said, he went on to do the Ninth Configuration, write a bunch more books. He eventually passed away in 2017, but that's kind of how he got off the ground. It's kind of the weird happenstance that resulted in his pretty insane run. So jumping in the movie a little bit, not going to, obviously pour through the whole plot, but right off the bat, you can tell he's trying to connect us to the first movie and just pretend the second movie didn't happen, right? There's like references to the film, the first film immediately, like this should have been called like Exorcist III, definitely not 2. Like, and he puts his name in the. I swear in the title, the title credits at the beginning. I swear, like William Peter Blatty is on the screen like 12 times.
I think
like
that might have been like a conceit. Like if the studio wasn't allowing him to just call the movie Legion, then he's like, then you better put my name everywhere.
It was literally like, I swear I stopped counting, but it was like a dozen times you saw his name pop up before the first line in the movie. But I mean, you see Damien Karras, the young priest in the first movie. You hear the music, right? The iconic music pop earlier. You see the image of the staircase that Father Karras, tumbles down at the end of the first movie. Immediately creepy church shit starts happening right off the bat. Right. It was pretty. Oh, this is one thing that, like, I remember the first time I watched this movie, I was like, what the fuck is happening with the, like, weird church or the weird image of Jesus up on the screen.
Oh, surprise!
Up on the front. Yeah, surprise! I was like, is that like an animatronic Chuck E. Cheese Jesus? Like, what the fuck am I looking at? Like, is that one of the mannequins from Tourist Trap? Like, what am I looking at on the screen? And then I eventually settled on, here's why it's so weird. It reminds me of Kubla Kraus from the Rankin Bass Jack Frost. Have you ever seen Jack Frost, the Rankin Bass stop motion?
Okay.
And he's got Kubla Kraus as like the big, like bearded guy who rides on the weird iron horse or whatever. It just reminded me of that, and it was super creepy. So right off the bat, creepy church stuff kind of gets established, right? There's some manner of supernatural kind of demonic presence that sets the tone for the fact that for the rest of the movie there is a lot of like almost a police procedural, Steve, you kind of alluded to it. It's almost like I don't want to say a whodunit, but like, it's like a forensic police procedural for a lot of it with really, really powerful performances. But underneath there is something, quite supernatural or demonic, satanic, whatever you want to call it, kind of fizzling under the surface. So the one thing I absolutely love, especially in the early part of this movie, and I could watch this movie over and over. It's one of my absolute favorites. I love the dialogue between George C. Scott, between Father Dyer. The first time I watched this, I wasn't younger, but I mean, it was probably 15 years ago when the sequence about the carp and George C. Scott explaining to, there's a carp in my bathtub, that whole thing. And like Father Dyer's trying not to laugh in his face about it. I absolutely love that scene. The gravity that he lends to just like otherwise mundane conversations, whether he's, interviewing people at the hospital, whether he's grilling the kind of investigation team. He can go from kind of like esoteric and like almost playful in an annoyed way to like just, I mean, he's one of those people, like, you can just imagine him smashing his fist on the table and everyone just shuts the fuck up, and looks at, he's just like so commanding in that way. But I had to look how old he was when this movie was filmed, because he was only like 61 or 63 years old, but he looks 89 fucking years old. You know what I mean? But he has like a teenage daughter.
Right.
And he also legitimately looks older than his mother-in-law. Yeah. Like she's supposed to be like the old stereotype, which she was the only character that kind of could pass as like lending some levity, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was more of her that they cut out. Like you almost wonder, like, you know, you can she's like one step away from like Mama's Family or something, like cigarette and curlers in her hair and throwing little quips out there. But yeah, she has that very like that little like kind of quirky, like designed to lend levity attitude, but then she only has like 2 lines.
Right.
So I wonder if George C. Scott or even Blatty was like, yeah, no, we don't need any more of that. But
there's a lot of different parts of levity throughout the film, though.
There is,
because like you have like that in the hospital scene when you're just kind of introduced to the hospital itself. You have the old guy in the wheelchair just kind of rolling around and exposing himself.
Oh yeah, that's too. I forgot about that scene. He just zooms up and flashes the nurse or the orderly. One of my other favorite ones. I mean, literally laugh out loud every time I see this one. Is when Father Dyer is talking to the president of the university. You know, the kind of head priest or whatever he is, and he's like, you know, what are you doing this afternoon? He's like, I'm at the pictures. I'm seeing, It's a Wonderful Life. Seen it 37 times. He goes, that's commendable. Like the way he says it. And he's like, do you have a favorite picture? And he's like, The Fly. Like the way he enunciates and like opens his mouth in this kind of like dry, joking way. I just kills me, that line. But yeah, there is definitely some levity in there for sure.
I felt like even with Kinnaman as a character, I almost, like, as much as I could understand and see like how amazing like he was for that character, that at times I felt a little slightly awkward because I almost wanted him to have like a little bit more emotion to some of it, because I feel like it was funny and it was great and you could tell where he was coming from. But I was at the same time like, man, if this character was like, I couldn't even think of an actor that would probably even like have that, like what I'm envisioning, because it almost felt like there needed to be somewhat comic relief involved in it.
Yeah, I love that. So here would be my argument to that. I love, and this is why I think, you know, he's a great example of like, now remember, he's an actor from a different era, right? Yeah. But that like the masterful things he does to inject, because he is this gruff, jaded, cynical police lieutenant, right? On, a murder, what do they call it? Like a homicide detective, right?
Right.
And when he injects emotion in the smallest way, it is just, to me, like, just, it's like someone punches me in the chest. Like when he goes into, he knows he has, and you don't even know at the time that this is what he's doing. But when he walks into the hotel room that Father Dyer has just been murdered, he knows he has to look at both of his hands to see if the finger's gone, to see if the Gemini symbol is on the other palm, and then of course to see if his head's there, right? So he knows he has to see. He doesn't want to look at his friend like that. But when he looks, and it's like he just got punched in the chest, and he just does this like jolt, you know what I mean? And you're just like, this guy who is this borderline stoic individual just gets punched in the chest and has that visceral reaction. It's just like, oh man, I love how subtle his performance is. Even little stuff earlier on when the priest gets murdered through the confessional early on, and he just walks around, looks at one hand, walks to the other side, look there. You don't know why he's looking at the hands at that point, right? But just, he doesn't give it away. He doesn't make it like, hey, look, I'm looking at his hand. Let me put it in front of my face, flip it over. Like, he just does it really, really subtly. Yeah. I don't know. I appreciate that as much. Here's another thing I noticed. This was the first time I noticed this, even though I probably watched this movie, I want to say this is probably the fourth time maybe I've watched it, third or fourth time. But there is a scene that I never noticed before, is when Father Dyer, when his friend is first in the hospital, hasn't been, he's still alive, goes in to see him, brings him the cheeseburger, hassles him, and then leaves. He walks up, this gruff guy, he's all business. He's going to go in and yell at him for not taking care of himself, doing whatever. He stops outside the hotel room, gathers himself, takes a deep breath, puffs his chest out, and then walks in. So it's this like, I don't want to show how much I care, but and he even says later on, like when he says like about Father Karras, he's like, he was my best friend. I loved the man. Like, he just like, when he had, like, he doesn't want to give away his depth of emotion.
Sure.
But or he doesn't want to give away how much he truly cares. And it's just like so quintessential of a man of that era, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think to clarify what I was referring to is I feel like that, one of the early scenes when we're seeing Kinderman talking to the team of people, and he almost has this like sarcasm to him. It comes off like it should be almost even more flamboyant.
Yeah, it could be funnier. Yeah, when he's like, "Oh, I was talking to Mars," and they usually respond or whatever.
I think that's where I was just like, "Whoa, it felt awkward." Whereas I can see what you're saying, where you're like, where he has to go into these like positions and be like a dude and just like protect himself and almost be unemotional about it. But yeah, no, I guess my specific thing was more so like, if this character were like this like flamboyant but like very intellectual detective of sorts character, I could see that also working too.
If he was a Tony Shalhoub monk type situation, right?
Yes.
No, I can appreciate that. I like I said, that makes sense. I think he definitely, his sarcasm is bone dry. You know what I mean? He's saying outlandish shit, but with the straightest of faces and with an air of like almost, I don't want to say malice, but it's like I'm being sarcastic because I want you to feel bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When he's talking to his other people, like, I'm not trying to make you laugh. I'm trying to make myself feel better because you're an incompetent shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's
absolutely.
That's kind of his approach. But yeah, he's, like I said, I just absolutely love that performance. And that's a big part of it for me. We talked a little bit about the outside of the, his relationship with Damien. And of course you see it with Father Dyer, but you see, eventually you start to realize that like Father Dyer is kind of taking the place of Father Karras with him. And he's kind of looking for, it's interesting because, and I didn't think about this recently because I never made the connection that his name was Kinderman, which is, man-child kind of almost, right? And he's looking for like direction from these friends that maybe are more of a father figure to him. I don't know. It kind of like there's maybe another level that I've never read the novel, so there might be another level there to that. But the other thing that I really love about this movie is it lets your imagination do a lot of the heavy lifting, but it does it better than any other movie that I can think of. Like there are some movies that just, and one thing would be a criticism of like, a lot of Lovecraft works, especially, and not just movie adaptations, but Lovecraft's, writings, is he almost takes this like weird, I don't want to say lazy way out, but he'll just be like, it's something so horrifying. It's indescribable. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, but you could try to describe it. You know what I mean? Like,
you guys just won't get it.
Yeah. It's beyond anything your brain can comprehend in the deepest realms of horror.
And then we assume everything
like, cool,
Lovecraft
try,
does. Yeah. We assume everything he does is just too confusing. And we're like, okay, this is amazing.
But like this one, they really do it. Mm-hmm. Like they go like, we're going to describe this horrific thing that happened to, the boy at the beginning when he's describing what happened to Father Dyer, obviously, and then later on when they have to have like this description of what happens to the nurse, and the priest as well in the confessional. Like the way they describe it, it's just like your mind is just reeling, because you can't help but imagine this horrible setting that they came up in, but you don't really see it, right? Which I thought was pretty interesting. Another really great scene when he's explaining. This movie does a better job of exposition than any other movie I can think of because it's a novel and there's a lot of a lot to explain. Let's put it that way. But they do it in a way that I think is really leans a lot of kind of heavy lifting on the performances, but they do a great job with it. When George C. Scott's talking to the hospital administrator about how he knows that this has something to do with the Gemini killer, like it's just, it could just be in another movie that could just be like boring exposition or unrealistic exposition, but he does it in a way of like, I have this in my brain and I have to get it out for other humans to hear because I feel crazy. You know what I mean? And it's just, I don't know, such a powerful sequence for me.
And that's like an interesting thing about the film overall, because we're talking about how William Peter Blatty wrote the novel and then directed the movie. How many times has that happened ever?
Yeah.
You know? But because he's done that, like he has already envisioned everything in his head. So he's seen it in his mind's eye as he's written the novel, so he knows how it should play out on film. And despite what you can argue it's amateur in nature compared to other filmmakers, because a lot of the shots are very flat and, you know.
Yeah, but some of the cinematography is not amazing.
It's not amazing, but there are some. There's definitely a very classic shot that, you know, everybody
down the hallway, right?
So he knows how to play out exposition visually. You know, as you already mentioned, when they investigate the first priest murder, George C. Scott goes around and checks the hands. He could have, again, said it out loud. Check the hands. See if you know, but no, he did it visually. So
right.
Yeah, it's masterful storytelling, not perfect directing, but it really comes through to me in the cinematography a little bit. Like one thing I noticed, actually I didn't notice the first time, I read it somewhere else and then noticed it when I watched it this time, is he definitely doesn't know how to light African-American actors.
No.
To the point where that one poor guy, you can barely like see him. You know what I mean? It's just like there are certain amateurish things in that capacity that like veteran filmmakers would know how to do a little bit more. But yeah, I think he more than makes up for it in the like incredible visual storytelling. But I did like cinematography wise, you know, he does some things like, you know, doing the top down or bottom up perspectives for like more emotionally charged scenes. Like he doesn't just make it purely procedural, which I think he deserves a little bit of credit, knowing that he's not a director, right? by trade. So, so kind of moving forward, one thing I caught, like, I really love the character of that psych doctor, and this is a great example of, like I said, the guy from that plays Herschel on The Walking Dead. He'll do stuff. Same thing with the Ninth Configuration. He'll do things with characters that just make such a small little thing that make a character infinitely more. You create your own backstory in your head a little bit about him, or infinitely more interesting, where he makes it seem like it's the first time he's ever smoked a cigarette, but he's chain smoking cigarettes. But the way he's holding it is so strange, with like 3 fingers, and then like he's desperately trying to put it out. I think they're trying to communicate he's got some degree of like obsessive compulsive disorder or something like that. But here's another quick thing that I only mentioned. You know, I watched this movie a little closer this time than I have in the past. Did anybody notice in the university president, like the hallway outside the university president's office, when George C. Scott first goes to talk to him about like, hey, the Gemini killer kind of thing, and how's, you know, do you know anything about this? There's a statue in the hallway that I'm pretty sure is the Joker from Batman.
Yeah.
What the hell was that?
Did you notice that?
Nope, I didn't. I definitely need to rewatch them.
First time I saw it, and I was like,
it has like a knife.
Okay.
And then
and like almost clown makeup, right? And I was like, is that something that I don't know, because obviously statues reoccur throughout the movie, and in most cases it's just, you know, the Gemini killer taking the head off of a statue and replacing it on one of his victims. But I was like, why is that the first time I noticed it? Like, is the demon in that statue? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I can't make it heads or tails of it. But this was the first time I noticed it. Was so bizarre.
I'm just looking this up right now too, and I'm like, holy shit, yeah.
First time I noticed it. And I almost wonder if maybe the cuts that I saw it in before it wasn't there or something. I don't know. That would be hard. I don't know. Anyway, maybe somebody can answer that for us. But long story short, kind of in a nutshell, you know, Father Karras, the end of the first movie, I'm sure everyone's seen The Exorcist, but kind of intentionally allows the demon, I think Pazuzu is, you know, what they don't really call that out at all in this movie, but that's the demon's name in the first movie, you know, allows him to come, you know, into his body from Reagan's body, and then kills himself by, you know, throwing himself out the window, or attempts to kill himself. But the Gemini killer, who had been executed at the same time, so, you know, so this is almost like not happy, but fortunate accident for them. He was executed at the same time, decides to make this deal with the demon to be able to come come back through the body of Father Karras, and the demon is going to give him abilities to kind of basically like jump consciousness to continue to perform his murders in exchange for also doing the demon's bidding, which is essentially carrying through with the kind of torment of Father Karras, right? Because he kind of foiled his plans and performed the exorcism in the first time around in the first film. So he kind of comes back in place, in Damien Karras's body. He gets put in this high security psych ward because, and Brad Dourif explains that it took him 15 years to kind of like slowly regenerate Father Karras's brain cells enough for his body to be functional to be able to carry out the things he needs to carry out in the metaphysical sense with the other victims and everything. So that is the example of this movie would have made absolutely no sense if they didn't put that in there. So it kind of needed to be, but it is just pure exposition. But Brad Dourif pulls it the fuck off so hard. That scene of him in the cell talking to him and he's, for the viewer, bouncing back and forth between, of course, it's Father Karras's physical body, and that's what you're assuming George C. Scott's character is seeing, but they're showing it as the Gemini killer, as Brad Dourif. But it's just a fucking acting clinic in my mind, especially given ridiculous monologues. Like, you just are handed this insane list of exposition and you're able to pull it off. It's really, really pretty impressive in my mind. So you get a little bit about, backstory as well about like George C. Scott's character, like looking up the idea of like Legion and the idea of like some of these cryptic things that he's saying in the when he's having conversations with him about it in this like exorcism kind of manual or whatever. And then you're like, kind of, where does things go from here? Like, he's going to go after George C. Scott's character at one point, but in between that, you get the setup for them going after George C. Scott's family. But in doing that, they achieve one of the greatest jump scares in horror history, perhaps the greatest jump scare in horror history. And the setup for it is just masterful. So, Steve, you're talking about it's like a long sustained shot down a long hallway. And there's misdirection, there's red herrings, there's a scene, there's a sound which I remember the first time thinking when I watched it that it was the the surgical shears that were like opening up and locking open, but it's ice, it's supposed to be like ice cracking in a glass or whatever. She goes in, you get a preliminary jump scare from like some just like dickhead patient in the room. Then he
I think it was actually a doctor. I think it was like an on.
Oh, is that who was sleeping?
It was an on-call doctor.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, because he said like, yeah, I thought it was a patient, but yeah, it's in the psych ward, so it probably wouldn't be a door hanging wide open, right? Yeah, you're probably right. In any case, that's already a jump scare. He jumps up and reams her out and blah, blah, blah. Then she goes outside. Then she walks around for a while, and the cop gets up, walks away. So you're like, this is when something's going to happen. But then the cop comes back and sits down. Right. Then he gets up again. And then finally the payoff, which is this like, kind of hooded or wrapped figure comes out behind the nurse, and the quick zoom after this sustained shot for a long time, I think is the most powerful element, comes out after she's already almost past the entire frame, and then the sting of the music, and you don't see it. Yeah. Right. You literally don't see anything gory at all, and it's still just like, holy shit, just like, makes your heart stop.
It's a smash cut right to the beheaded statue. So you know exactly what happened. But
right.
Yeah. Yep. It is just, it's incredible. And I didn't think about till just now, this is the second movie I've talked about with shear murders. So apparently I have some sort of subconscious attraction to murdering people with shears.
Or landscaping.
I feel like
just landscaping, yeah.
I just want to note, like, with this movie, that I felt like a couple things that stood out to me, and that you've kind of already touched on, even like with the Gemini killer, like using other people. I don't know if we like have directly even said it now, but I feel like that is one of the most unique possession type movies or like storylines that I think I've ever seen, but also a lot, we can like divulge on that, but like also I feel like the murders themselves, because of the way they set them up, because of what that that they happen, whether or not you didn't really see as much gore all the time. I mean, I think when Father Dyer died, that was one of the more gory ones, but like what your brain has to interpret and what it creates and what you have to like think about what happens. I think with this movie is one of the biggest pluses is that those are the two things that I'm like, they did so well with this movie, and that was one of them too.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is with Father Dyer dying, all you see is the blood on the wall.
Right.
But you think you saw more. You know what I mean? All you see is "It's a Wonderful Life" written in blood on the wall.
Right.
You know, with the 2 L's and stuff. So it's wild. Yeah. The way they kind of set it up and the explanation and the fact that he's killing in a way that is like theater to him. Yeah. Right. And his like level of expertise is just kind of like, it's just obviously super sadistic. So, the one thing I would say that was kind of like, I wish we had a little bit more about, but I get it. Like it was a tertiary thing, but it ended up coming back as such a big part of the movie at the end was the like kind of plight of the white-haired priest. That went and obviously performed an exorcism in somewhere internationally.
I think they said the Philippines.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought it was Thailand, but yeah, I think you're right. The Philippines. He goes and performs, and they talk about how his hair went immediately white, and then you get that one scene of him in his room, and he can kind of sense that something is happening, but they never really explain why that is the case. It almost feels like an invitation for him to come to, he knows something's happening. And obviously he knows that Father Karras or the body of Father Karras is still in the psych ward. Like he knew where to go, but you almost are like, what? You know why he was there. Things were starting to like in his mind, he got some sort of like psychological, metaphysical signal that it came, and it was very straightforward. It was, the crucifix fell off the wall, is bleeding, blah, blah, blah. He saw it. He was like, okay, the demon is ready to carry out its task or whatever. But why would the demon give him that hint?
Right.
I guess is the thing I'm not sure about yet.
And I guess the other question I have is, so Father Morning is the white-haired priest we're talking about. And obviously he has this exorcism background, and he would have known Father Karras when Father Karras was alive. Right. And Father Morning is like the on-call priest for the hospital that they're keeping Father Karras at. So
Right.
Is it that Father Morning has seen Father Karras already? Like, does he know that he's in the psych ward?
Yes. I believe so.
Because
he went right to the room.
There's literally only 2 scenes with Father Morning, and he doesn't interact with George C. Scott until the very end.
But he, with the president of the university, is who brings him up to George C. Scott in the office. So he knows that he
knows he exists.
He is yes.
It's just they don't interact beforehand. There's no scene talking about Father Karras, so you kind of have to.
Oh, you're saying why does George C. Scott and Father Morning? Was it Morning?
Yeah.
What is it? Father Morning. Why does George C. Scott and Father Morning have any type of relationship?
Well, I'm just saying you never see them discuss the fact that Damien Karras is still alive. So
no, I took that as it was purely like serendipitous. That he got the bat
signal that the demon is ready.
The bat signal. That's he got the bat signal. He went to see it. So here's my take. This is a stretch, and they don't necessarily they certainly don't explicitly say this. My thought is because ultimately what defeats the demon at the end is Damien Karras is able to muster enough strength from within the body to take over for just a moment, enough to make the demon vulnerable, and then he shoots him. Right. My thought was Damien Karras knew that George C. Scott was coming there, or he'd already been there once or twice at that point. I don't remember. He knew he was there. He put his faith in George C. Scott to fix this. And he thought, I need Father Morning's help. And he put out the bat signal from within the demon realm in some capacity. That's how I took it. Again, that may be a stretch, but why, if he was giving him a signal, why wouldn't he? Well, no, it makes sense. So I was like, why wouldn't he like send him a dove to come land on his window? Why did he have to make Jesus's eyes bleed? But I think, he wanted to communicate the demon is active.
He did the exact opposite of sending a dove. He killed a bird.
He did.
He killed a bird.
Gosh.
So it was really, really a little bit cryptic there, but I think that there's enough, kind of ties binding thing together where you can kind of make some discerning assumptions about what actually happened there. But in any case, to wrap things up, because I've been talking forever about this movie, but I could probably talk for 2 more hours about it. You so rarely get a car chase scene. It's not a chase, it's a race scene with a car in a horror movie, followed directly by cobras. And that's something that is just, you can't look a gift horse in the mouth. When you get a car race and then cobras right after it, that's going to at least bump it up half a point in my mind. But yeah, the scene in the cell is such an awesome left turn because things are generally pretty procedural. Of course, you get, an occasional weird Damien Karras face with glowing eyes. Of course, you get, the explanations of the murders, but otherwise nothing terrifically supernatural is shown to you. And then all of a sudden, lightning strikes the floor away and there's snakes and fire and crazy shit happening. But it doesn't outlast its welcome. It's like, shit hits the fan. George C. Scott, has this kind of moment where he stands up to the demon, and then Father Karras from inside picks his spot, if you will. Shoot him now. And George C. Scott's ready to go. And he knew all along that George C. Scott was going to be ready for a sign, for a symbol, for something, because they had this connection as such, close friends or whatever, that he was going to be able to be ready when the time came. So love the ending of that. There was a couple of things that I still have that are not necessarily plot holes, but things maybe I don't understand. One of them was, how did George C. Scott get away? Because then right after that, they're burying Father Karras in his grave. All the priests are kind of watching, and it's a, we won. Yeah. Kind of, he says, I think he literally said we won. The question is, how did he get away with murdering an inmate by shooting him in the head point blank range? And how did he explain that? I don't know.
He's a cop.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, do we need to go into that, really?
I guess you're right.
But also, Father Morning was being assaulted. Nobody was there, and you can see that Father Morning's skin was being ripped off.
I forgot that. Yeah, I forgot Father Morning was there, and he's obviously, there. I think there's probably blood on the ceiling and that sort of thing, so they can probably go, okay, something unexplainable happened here, I guess. But the other thing I wrote down here that I didn't make the connection with when Brad Dourif explains that he escaped in Father Karras's body. And he talks about how the coroner or whatever freaked out when he sat up and banged his way out of the pauper's coffin, the priest's coffin type of thing. Who was buried in Father Karras's grave before that? And if there wasn't a body there, how did George C. Scott, being a homicide lieutenant and best friend, not know that his body wasn't in the grave?
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? How was that not part of the narrative that his body got up?
Yeah, the whole that was always a sticking point for me, is the whole escape.
Yeah.
And and then subsequent imprisonment, and then we already brought up, Father Morning probably knows that it's Damien Karras down there, and
well, he knows that it's a demon. I think he knew that there was a demon in there, and I think the reason the Father Karras being there for 15 years didn't really bug me as much, because you learn that Dr. Temple, the weird cigarette guy, had been basically covering it up. Because he had letters from him, and he knew he was a demon. He knew he was doing, and he was obviously had his own set of like mental. He targeted Dr. Temple because he knew that he had he could penetrate his mind because he had his own issues. Yeah, just like he manipulated, like he was talking about how the catatonics are so easy to manipulate. Well, they established that Dr. Temple was easy to manipulate too. But yeah, I definitely don't know how he didn't know that the body was missing, unless like the coroner's office covered it up, or the priest covered it up. Yeah, because all the priests are looking on the graveyard at the end, and they're not participating. They're just like sitting up there gawking, and that made me think that maybe they had covered all that up.
Yeah, it's possible. And
just hope.
Yeah.
But in any case, I'll shut up about it. I love this freaking movie. I could watch it probably once a week, and probably see something new that I loved every single time. And I love the Wee One ending. And I at the end, I always imagine. I can't help but imagine after the Wee One cut to credits, Bender at the end of Breakfast Club, fist up, walking under the field goal post. It's just like, for such a dark movie to have like such a complete ending, like something in the, very basic bitch mentality of me, like I feel so satisfied by that happy ending. And I just love it. But all right, I will shut up about The Exorcist 3.
I guess one of the things, and maybe Meg, you probably know this as well, but it speaks to the monologues in the film, is that it's probably one of the most clipped and sampled films in heavy metal music, because you can hear so many clips of Brad Dourif and George C. Scott in like Children of Bodom songs and Necrophagia are two bands that come up in my mind that they use those monologues.
Yeah, no, I mean, my wrap up for The Exorcist was I all around it's an amazing movie. I'm not gonna try to poo on it right now, but
don't you fucking dare.
But I think my only critique, besides the couple things that I mentioned, were that I think in watching it, that sometimes, like, I feel like it goes from 0 to 60, but I felt like that beginning 0 part where you're like, we're setting everything up, we're getting everything in order to like make the connection of things, could have been shortened down. And if this movie were, say, done like now, I think that would have been shortened up, and maybe more emphasis would have been on like, I mean, but maybe I'm questioning myself slightly on that and saying that, like, I think you needed to know how much manipulation was going on in like the psych ward. And again, that was what I noted that was so powerful, is that was such a cool way to project a different type of possession that Gemini Killer was able to like possess other people and get them to do his bidding for him, So but I think in the same time, I felt like to a certain extent, like it was so slow and then went really fast. Whereas I think in typical Exorcist movies, there's so much emphasis on like what happens when the possession is going on. So right. I think I can kind of see how it works, but at the same time, it still felt a little slow. But yeah, I'll admit, it's an amazing movie. I really am not going to...
All I'm saying is glass houses, Meg, because this goddamn movie you're about to talk about could have been 25 minutes long. All right?
Hey, we've got a lot to talk about, guys.
Damn it. God damn it.
Meg, defend yourself.
Well, you guys are getting to know me now, and you see where I go with a lot of my horror movie picks. So, like, I've said it before, and I'm like, I oftentimes feel like some of the most gut-wrenching, like, horror-type theme stories come from things that, like, we can relate to. I think, like, when you get past, like, all the classics, you're like, okay, what's gonna scare me now? And it's always, like, what's real life? And so it's like, it's not like Michael following you around or Freddy haunting your dreams. You're not really dealing with like ghosts in the new house you just bought, though that would be a dream of mine to have a haunted house. I don't know why. Like, it just would be great. Now, when we dive into this movie, because of all the themes and some symbolism that's going on, it's not totally realistic, but it still feels that you can relate to certain things in a way because of the religious connotation of everything. Anywho, let's dive in. So Mother is a 2017 American psychological horror film written and directed by Darren Aronofsky. Notables being Pi, Requiem for a Dream, which we've already talked about how, just couple the two and you just want to go off yourself.
Meg watches it as a bedtime flick every night. It's a lullaby in her house.
Absolutely. Below the Fountain, Black Swan being another one. So I think this was one of the follow-ups to Black Swan where he wanted to dive back into like this almost horror genre of sorts. But Mother is jam-packed with stars, including Jennifer Lawrence. I'm definitely going to call her J-Law this entire time. Javier Bardem, Ed Harris, Michelle Pfeiffer, Domhnall Gleeson, Brian Gleeson, and Kristen Wiig. So another thing too, like notable cool things about this that I learned was that Darren Aronofsky wrote this in 5 days, which I thought was pretty cool. And I don't know, maybe if he has religious background, he knew his story he's going into it. But IMDb, their quick quirk about it is a couple's relationship is tested when uninvited guests arrive at their home, disrupting their tranquil existence, which I feel like that's being nice.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to the Exorcist III one, where it's you told me nothing about what this movie actually is.
Yeah.
That's just on the surface level description of that's like calling Jaws guys go out on a fishing trip that goes awry.
Yeah, exactly. It leaves so much for interpretation. So
guy doesn't like babysitters.
So this little movie is telling the story of a lot of biblical context, but also in a spiritual way, looking at Mother not only as a mother, like Mary Magdalene, but also as Mother Earth. And that was, I think, when I initially saw it, was my first connotation of it. But I find there's this duality in the biblical stories that reflect really heavily on life, that make it relatable and understandable, whether you're religious or not. So me, no gods, no masters. This is not it. But so I'm going to talk about a lot of the biblical context of it all, but also how it's reflected through my lens, and all going on at the same time. So yeah, boys, let's go. So I love how it opens with Jennifer Lawrence, J-Law. Yep, gonna keep doing it.
My girl J-Law, which I love. She's great.
J-Law.
She's great, and the performances are great in general.
I do have to, yeah, definitely. So we open it up and you see Mother's Spring. So it's super intense right off the bat. You're like, holy shit, this woman is burning alive. What the fuck?
That's what I wrote. My first note is flaming hair girl. Cool. And I wrote cool, Kewl.
And then we meet Javier Bardem's character, who is mainly referred to as him. And we'll kind of dive into all the different names of these characters. But he's setting a crystal onto this shelf of sorts. And I think even my mind initially referred to it as it almost looks like a seed, because initially, and then you instantly dive into everything's almost going back to being perfect or normal, and everything's coming back to life. So I think if you're paying attention, you may think of it just as a good transition, but watch the house and the land come to life when the crystal is kind of being planted. Tells us that something, quote unquote, is really creating this scene that we're about to watch. And I thought that was really cool.
Can I say that if a car chase is a +1 for me, adults calling their significant other baby is a minus every single time for me. There is nothing more I hate than a grown-ass couple calling each other baby.
Aw, you're speaking to the romantic in me, and I'm real sad for that.
Baby. Listen, hun, sweetie, whatever, that's fine, but baby?
What, do you use doll now? Are you that old school? You're
yeah, broad.
Kate's doll.
I call my wife a broad, yeah, no, but I don't know, something about baby, the only thing worse than baby is when they, couples call each other mommy and poppy, or mom or daddy or something like that. Yeah, that's literally, for me, baby is one step above that.
Hey, I'm all here for the babe shit.
Babe is playful, but baby, I don't know, something about baby creeps me out.
Okay, I can feel that.
Personal preference. Moving on. Let's not sort through my issues. Let's not sort through my issues right now, guys. Mind your own business.
You brought it up.
So
I know.
You did definitely bring this up.
Don't talk to me about my personal preferences. Just hear what I say and move on. Don't even comment on it.
You're gonna be triggered this entire fucking movie.
I am. I was triggered by this movie in general.
So, when we're getting to know Mother, the character, Jennifer Lawrence's character, you can definitely tell quickly she's a caretaker. She knows she takes care of the house, she takes care of the husband, and she always is seemingly fixing things. So, and like even through that, she's encouraging her husband to do his writing throughout the whole time. Like she's a very, I think, supportive wife in a lot of ways. But you kind of get this sense like she's longing to have a baby. And you see that through premonitions that while she's doing work, she almost like, it's like the wall is now her womb. Let's just use that. And that we come to find out that even this space, the house itself is Eden to her. And it's like this paradise, as she says to Michelle Pfeiffer's character, who is considered woman, who we'll meet here in a minute. So at this point, that I really have to note that the movie seems slow. It feels calm. And I feel like Aronofsky did a great job using camera work to change the vibe of all the scenes and like through each ebb and flow of what's going on. I like that like in the beginning, you kind of are able to relax and kind of get the sense of that, yeah, they're in their paradise. They're in this like Eden of sorts. So pretty quickly, we meet the man, as he's so referred to. It's just Ed Harris.
Right.
Did you?
I love Ed Harris.
Yeah.
He's great. They're all the performances are great in there. Javier Bardem's freaking amazing. But can I say also one real quick thing that stuck in my craw? No one paints in nice white clothes. All right. I don't care if you're Mother Nature or fucking I don't know, Virgin Mary or whoever she's supposed to be. Nobody paints in this clothes. You paint in like t-shirts with like the Looney Tunes dresses of Charlotte Hornets on them or something.
Brian, this is the Garden of Eden. She can know where the fuck she wants.
I know, but I was just like,
you paint.
Also, all these people are too good looking.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on?
You paint in really nice white clothes if you plan on getting paint on it, so you can go out in public and have people ask you about your painting.
Yeah. Wow, you're pretty DIY, aren't you?
I think I would definitely wear darker clothes if that was the case. I'd be like, no, this is splat.
That's true.
Splat.
Everything she had was like, yeah, she was very Chip and Diane or Chip and Joanna, what's her name on the Flippers show? Everything was very like neutrals, colors, like very soft and yeah.
Well, she's Mother, so she is very soft and delicate, and she's an amazing lady.
Yes, it makes sense. It is absolutely that she's doughy-eyed. So
it was earth tones.
Yeah, earth tones. Yes, Mother Earth tones. That's it's gonna be my new line of clothing, Mother Earth tones.
She floats into Lowe's on like an ethereal cloud, and it's like, "Hey, where's your earth tones? I'm Mother Nature. Where's your earth tones?"
It was amazing. So Ed Harris's character, he visits the house looking for a place to stay, and he claims he's a doctor. And Javier's character, him, as also referred to him, he just really can't say no. He's just like this kind, giving person. He's just like, yeah, no, that's totally fine, whatever. But I also think is like a neglectful husband thing. Hey, I'm being triggered in other ways, guys. This is whatever. So while like the Mother character just seemingly wants to be considered, and I think we'll kind of see that theme throughout the whole thing when they're trying to tell this story. So breaking it down with the characters we have met so far, the way the story kind of reflects it is like him, Javier's character, is God. Mother is Mary, or we can refer to her as Mother Earth. And I think I kind of like seeing her character go back and forth, because I think in ways, whether or not you're spiritual or not, or religious, like you can kind of see it, you can kind of see her story told in both ways. And then man is Adam. So we're going to meet Eve here shortly, when we meet Ed Harris's wife, Woman. So I felt like Ed Harris did a fantastic job portraying this like ignorant, selfish character who just like could not care how anyone else felt.
Oh man, he was driving like he was triggering me pretty hard. I think the first time he lights up a cigarette in my house, again, not opposed to smoking. This isn't turning into an anti-smoking PSA episode, but like she asked him.
I'm gonna quit smoking after this. Guys.
She asked him. He didn't want. Yeah, and then the second time, I'm like, I feel like I couldn't. I just desperately wanted him to be thrown out on his ass.
I know, and I had a note about that too because I felt like that was just another like point of his character and like where the movie is showcasing Adam almost and even his wife woman as Eve as these characters like who just are so ignorant and blind to what they're doing that like whatever they do doesn't matter. So like when he was asked to put out a cigarette, he just like fucking threw it on the ground. Mm-hmm. And you're like, even then when you kind of have this context that maybe there is this other spiritual end of things and we're just like looking at ourselves through the lens of what we're fucking doing to the world, that like doing that alone is just this very ignorant and selfish thing that you're just like, yep, I'm just going to throw this thing on the ground and there's no consequences to it.
Yeah.
Whereas like Mother Nature is always having that consequence and always just trying to find ways to survive. You're going to definitely see hippie Meg come out here a lot in this episode.
Yeah.
Like it's the only way I could describe it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I even noted like, it's almost like this caricature of like people in this like symbolic way. And so we meet him, he's instantly, you understand, like he's sick, he's coughing, he's like coughing up shit, he's puking, which kind of referred to maybe he was just drinking a little bit. But then we also see that he has this like wound on his back and whatnot.
Was that supposed to be where the rib came out?
Probably.
I took that as that's where the rib was supposed to come out, and then Eve shows up soon thereafter.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. That makes total sense then. Yeah. I honestly, it's kind of interesting looking at this movie through this like lens of like, this is a religious like horror movie of sorts, because I grew up with zero religion. So like even just having to like dive in, even researching and making sure I'm like covering the stories. If you guys are either more familiar with the stories, please elaborate.
No, I just did. Really interesting. I mean, that's obviously a pretty like surface level one, but yeah, I definitely did Bible quizzing. As if I know either you were susceptible or were exposed to Bible quizzing, but yeah, that was the thing we did. We traveled to other churches and competed in essentially like Bible quiz game shows amongst other church
what
groups.
Was the best thing that you won?
Salvation.
No, the love of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Yeah. What kind of fucking question is that? No. Yeah. So I was again not that our personal my personal beliefs come into this, but yeah, I was raised Lutheran, so we were like all about that and
yes, the
confirmation class and all that stuff. So
yeah, as a Catholic, I did not have a quiz league, but
Lutheran is Catholic.
You definitely had your shit.
Catholic light,
yes,
but also with some of the lameness of like other, kind of like mainstream like Protestant religions and stuff. So
you guys quit out from the orthodoxy.
Yeah, we were like, no, yins are a bunch of squares. We're gonna go over here and like this is just a symbol.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I guess I didn't consider like what it would be like for somebody who had no religious background. But for me, like the metaphors in this movie are just hit me over the head.
Yeah, they were so. Yeah. I mean, it was like, and again, I remember even the first time I saw this, like, yeah, it's Adam. And where's Eve? Oh, there she is. Oh, Cain and Abel. Which one of them's getting murdered? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they were very. But yeah, again, you're 100% right, Steve. I didn't even think about that. Somebody who doesn't necessarily have that, wasn't drilled into their brains like,
right.
Like I was.
And so I guess the cool thing about it is I was actually in rewatching this, I happened to watch it. My ex-boyfriend was just like, hey, yeah, I'd actually like to see that. Let's watch it. He grew up Catholic. So I was kind of like throughout the movie, like being like, hey, so what are you seeing? Because like I said, like the most I ever had as far as religion in my life was like, okay, Christmas and Easter every once in a while, but whatever. So
the Easter Bunny died for all our sins, like all that stuff. Yeah.
I'm like, isn't it about jelly beans?
I think it has something to do with eggs. I'm not sure. I still don't know.
Yeah. So I think though, like, prefacing all of this is that like, I looked at it, I guess, still in like a spiritual way of like, again, older 30-year-old Meg is like a little bit more hippie in her ways, and she just cares about the environment and shit like that. But like, so I think there's still just like this duality of like being a good person that I think you can still kind of start seeing throughout that, like, yeah, there's definitely religious here, yes. And we'll keep going, and we're like, yeah, so we meet the man's wife, who's played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and I think I don't know, maybe it was Catwoman, but I'm like, this character for her was just perfect. I feel like she had this sauciness to her that was just...
she's so good. Yeah.
But she also just had this like assertiveness, as well as like curiosity mixed with narcissism and being invasive, that I was just like, you know, I could see this allure to her as a character.
She was Eve the wine Aunt Karen.
Yeah.
You know what, though? You're 100% right. But she was the scariest character to me. Because, like, as I was putting this, because the thing that was the most effective to me is this part that you're talking about now. And, of course, it escalates, which I'm sure you're going to get to. But, like, the pushing the boundaries of politeness and etiquette in such that's such a great way to start building tension. So like at this point in the movie, yeah, you can see like the biblical allegories are pretty like on the nose and stuff. Like I said, again, for somebody who was raised, Christian, there is that stuff was almost secondary to me, because that thing, especially among strangers, that like polite company type of thing, and the trust issues that were coming out of it between the married couple was pretty effective to me. It's the most effective part of the movie to me. And like we're using the word triggered a lot here, and I'm not trying to be dramatic about it, but like I've definitely had that nightmare where it's a reoccurring nightmare, and this is maybe a little too much information about me personally, but I have a reoccurring nightmare of someone's being a jerk in my house, and I tell them to fuck off, and then everyone acts like I'm an asshole. Like that's a reoccurring thing. Or everyone's...
You're getting gaslit, man.
Everyone's being a jerk and doing something in my house or in my environment that I don't like, that is clearly wrong. I assert myself on it and explain that they're assholes and fuck off and get out of my house and whatever, and then everyone acts like I'm an asshole. So in this scene, like I was 100% like I was extremely sympathetic of Jennifer Lawrence's character. Like in this time, the whole time was just like, please tell him to fuck up, please tell him to fuck up. But of course she's dealing with a different, like some of these, like the pressures of some of these traditional gender roles are acting against her. That wouldn't obviously act on me necessarily in the same way. So I was like, I was just like, leave, run away. Like during that part.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I felt like where like the dynamic between like the husband versus the wife, and it's just like she just wanted to be fucking heard. And like you almost even see it get worse when Javier's character like meets these people, because they're clearly showing interest in him and what he's doing, and we find out after they get there that they knew who he was. Like there was a picture in their luggage, and it's like you could see him giving in a little bit to like their curiosity for things, but it's still not inspiring to him, because I think like when they show up, the idea of him writing, which is what Jennifer Lawrence, she was like trying to be this very supportive wife, and that seems to be why they are where they are, so on and so forth. And he's just like, yeah, no, I just don't have any interest. And you're like, what the fuck? But once they show up, shit just gets way more chaotic. And that's where I come back to the cinematography of it all, where I felt like they did a really good job at changing the ebb and flow of how you can feel like watching, or even that puts you in that perspective of like, I understand this. Like when things just become chaotic, everything is chaotic. And so like, and then people don't listen to you, and you're like, don't touch that. And they're like, let me touch this hot pot.
Yeah,
cool.
Shit hit the fan. And the people bouncing on the sink, I just wanted to set those people on fire. Like personally.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but for sure. I definitely, everything about that. So let's just keep moving through it. So, because I don't want to tell like the entire story, because I feel like we can go through each thing, but like let's talk about peak moments. So I like the scene even when him goes off with man, as we'll call them. So mother's kind of left looking after the house. She's again fixing things. She's just like trying to create this paradise, whereas woman then that's when she starts to bombard her about like, oh, you don't want to have kids, and she's just like, so she's just like prying, and you're just like, fuck off. This is not your business.
Right.
Like, don't try to like harsh on my vibe. So I feel like that was a very interesting scene where, I don't know, she's trying to set boundaries, but also like you just still see that narcissism coming through. And then she then continues to go into his office, which is definitely defined as almost like the tree. I think it was like described as like the tree of life of sorts. Like his office is like, this is the foundation for all of this. And Mother is still trying to protect her husband. And it's just like, no one's supposed to go in there without him, blah, blah, blah. So the woman backs off, but then him and the man come back. And I think that's where things just start taking this turn. So you learned that, that the man actually obviously knew who Javier's character was, and we go into seeing how the man and woman start just creating their own chaos together. So they know each other. They're like, we're just going to keep exploring. So they go and they break what we initially refer to as like the seed or the crystal that was in his office, and that like causes this other spiral where they then don't really care. They go off and go fuck in their room. And
that's the forbidden. They ate of the forbidden fruit, and it doesn't affect them. They're moving on, and they think there's no ramifications. Right? There's
no consequences to any of this. So, him obviously he's protecting his space. He closes it up. And what I found interesting in that scene after that, where Mother is definitely approaching them being like, you need to fucking leave. Like, here are your wet clothes because I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
You need to leave. And then I think there was like the next day or shortly after that, that's when we meet their two sons.
Yeah.
And this is where we talk about Cain and Abel coming into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that when the manipulative nature of Michelle Pfeiffer's character was the thing that was most scary about her too, is because she'll play to the emotions and she'll play to the social norms where like, yeah, finally.
My husband's dying.
Yeah, finally she goes, no, fuck you and your wet clothes. I'm going to go get it and get out of the house. And she plays he's sick. I need to go check on him. You know, that's more important than your house.
Right, exactly. So clearly we understand now that this man's dying, and that's when we get introduced to their sons. And this is, I think, where one of the big pivot points where shit goes off. And, I mean, the semantics of this trust, either way, go into that the older son is Cain, younger son is Abel, and the older son is kind of being blocked out of this through this trust that they're creating. So he just basically attacks the younger brother, kills him, and then just runs off.
Can I add, how many times in one movie can a single tear roll down a person's cheek? How many times? Is she, and also, people don't look that good when they cry. I wanted an ugly cry out of her. I don't know that she could be ugly. She's, obviously, her and Javier Bardem, two of the most just gorgeous humans. But
you kind of want.
Please look a little bit more ugly when you cry.
You're kind of wanting to talk though, Brian, because in your film, Brad Dourif always has a tear down his cheek too.
Brad, but he has a broken nose. Oh, yeah, he's ugly. All fucked up. He's all messed up.
Yeah, sure, he's ugly, but
he's also not real. Remember that. He's not real. They're not actually looking at him. I guess you could say that she's not real either. So, touche, salesman.
Well, with the death, we have that woman, man, and him go take the son that is now technically dead, almost dead, to the hospital, and they leave. And Mother is still like, what about me? Like, you're still just like, I'm just here just to do your bidding. And so she ends up taking time to clean the blood off the floor. She's like scrubbing it down, and she notices that it almost created this hole. So she goes in the basement. And I found this to be a very interesting moment because the blood is basically like going around this door that's in her basement that she had previously heard like huge bang at, which so is somehow symbolic to her, and she's like connecting with it. But when she opens the door, we see the frog as well as she sees the oil drum, but the frog symbolizing, I think there's two ways you can go with it, but it's probably more so that it's like a symbol of like the plague from Exodus. versus like, I also, again, when I was talking to my ex about this, he was just like, it's also could be signs of the apocalypse, and related to like Passover. I don't know if either of you guys have more details on that. But I found that to be really interesting, where again, we're just getting a little bit more symbolism throughout this, that something dark and dangerous is going to be happening. And then obviously she makes note that she sees the oil drum in that scene. So she takes time, cleans up this fucking blood, covers up the entire thing, but it really doesn't really go away because it ends up coming through the rug. I also want to make a note that, so we noticed that the older brother that did the murder, like, came back for a second and then he ran off. And from what I read, that like with Cain, like, you don't really know if he dies or not. And I felt like that was kind of like a cool connection with the way I read about it and saw the movie, that it could be a good connection, that you don't really know if he dies or not. He just kind of like disappears in that. When everyone gets back, we clearly understand that like the brother dies, and him is also just kind of like so torn up. He's like, he died of my arms, blah blah blah. He's like, feel bad for me. I am now this like person to comfort people in their death. And what then ensues is that a fucking party. Let's like, obviously it starts small. They start, the man and woman invite people over to mourn the death of their son. But it turns into a big party, and that's where we start seeing the people like sitting on the sink, and everything just becomes chaotic and no one really gives a fuck. And again, I look back to that viewpoint of like people in general, that there's just still this disconnect with people caring about other people. You know, I think so many people are just very selfish in so many ways, that they're like, this is just me, this is all about me, even when you're in a situation where you're mourning the death of someone. So I feel like, from my perspective, whether I think I saw like with the sink scene, there was like symbolism of like this being a flooding, and kind of being this other symbolism with religion and whatnot. And then basically after that scene, mother orders everyone to leave the house. She's like, everyone needs to just get the fuck out. You're disrespecting my shit. Get out. And him is kind of like almost offended by this. That he's just like, hey, this is what I invited these people. Why are you being so rude? And she's just like, you are like, they're like destroying this paradise, this Garden of Eden that we have. And so for whatever reason, which also made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I was like, that initiation into the love making scene, I'm like,
yeah,
that's like,
it got a little aggressive. Yeah, it was a little aggressive.
Very aggressive. I'm like, I mean, if it was purposeful, that's another story, but this is not. But anywho, I think like this was another one of those pivot points back to this like calmness. So we stopped getting the cinematography of it being so over in your face. It was a little bit calmer. So she wakes up basically being like, I'm pregnant, which I don't know any woman who would ever say that, but cool. That's great. And so he feels so inspired that he then goes back and write his book. So the book that we then come to understand that he has now written is basically a representation of the New Testament. So after all the Genesis stuff happens, him and Mother bone, and the child is conceived, and right afterwards,
that's how it's written up in the Old Testament. Actually, yeah. It's like, and then they boneth, and then
they bone, and then they beget.
Then some begetting happened,
and yay, they bone.
And yay, they did bone.
And it was hot.
I can only hope.
Hot is a great word with it. And yay, they did bone, and it was hot.
In the religion that we're now going to create, like in our own way, like that's going to be included. And
everything
then they
has to be like the Latin equivalent. The equivalent of Latin in this testament is just like Yinzer accent.
Everything's AWs or AHs.
He's like done writing the book. He's like, Mother, you need to read it. He's like, he didn't call her Mother like Mike Pence. That's not the same thing.
He is a little Pence-ish. Let's not. It's
a little Pence.
He's better looking. Listen, I'll listen to Javier Bardem anytime. But yeah,
yeah, you can call me Mother all day. That's fine. So as soon as Mother reads the book, Like she's so elated. She's just like crying. Again, maybe the 1 or 2 tear thing. Now I'm going to be really conscious of that. She does not cry as much as you think she would, but she seems so overwhelmingly like, this is the best thing you've ever written. Mm-hmm. But as soon as that happens, he fucking knows it too. Yeah. And, you know, he gets a call from his publicist. And then this is where we see the chaos begin again. So basically, people begin to show up in droves. Kristen Wiig plays a book industry professional who spreads around his new text and amps people up for it. So in other words, she's heralding, which her name is fucking Harold in the book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, there's not a lot of subtlety to any of that.
Yeah. To a certain extent, yeah.
That would be funny if I was almost expecting when I looked on IMDb, because they don't really say the names, you know, the thing. I almost was expecting like somebody to be called like John the Baptist or Judas or something.
Sure.
Like it was pretty obvious.
Yeah, but again, I think like the first time watching, I didn't notice that type of stuff. You know, I think I was still looking through a different lens versus
I'm not judging.
Really,
I just
no. Yeah. I just find it interesting too, because I feel like because it wasn't so blatant, I think it allowed for slight interpretation, or like to not necessarily have it be in your face if you weren't really necessarily growing up on that. But what I like, as soon as people start showing up, they're like reading this book. People are stealing things from the house. Mother is begging him to ask them to leave, but he doesn't. He's just like, they're my worshipers. They love this work, blah, blah, blah. He's so enthused. And I honestly would have to say this is probably literally the worst house party I've never been to.
Because it's funny. It devolves within moments from like a rave. Because there's literally music and people dancing and stuff like that. To
they had the full-on Matrix rave.
It was Matrix. Yeah, it was, and then it was looting immediately thereafter.
Yeah, immediately looting. Which, like, so also let's note that Mother goes into labor during this time, so she's pretty well at the end of her time there. Mm-hmm. But like, the things to note that like my own takeaways from seeing all of this is that, so we hear gunshots and then eventually like it almost seems like people are fucking being killed during this time. Mm-hmm. So I almost like was interpreting this as like killing in the name of God of sorts, like where people will literally do anything in the name of God. And then cage people, which maybe it's like the atheist in me, but like I find religion to be really dampening to like who we really like truly are inside as people. So I don't know if there would ever be context of that, but that could be my own interpretation. Probably my own interpretation. But
so I mean, again, in the Bible, like especially like Old Testament, which basically the whole movie is Old Testament, obviously the end we'll get to, but I mean there's a lot of references to like slavery within the Bible, and just like I'm pretty sure like most of the people you see in the cages are women, so it's also kind of a reference to all the servitude that women is expected out of women. You also have like a lot of wars between different sects of people and like people who are outside of Judaic class. So it's even though it's presented in a modern fashion, it's still also very, very much things that occur within the Old Testament.
Yeah, and the poverty aspect of it, people are starving, people don't know where, you know, it kind of like in this crazy, confusing whirlwind is just like communicating in as many ways as they can jam into, you know, a certain amount of scenes that like religion will always devolve into the worst of human nature.
Yeah. And I think that brings into my next point of like watching this kind of happen early in the party of sorts, where you see people like stealing stuff, and many of them were just like, I need a piece of him, blah, blah, blah. But I think in my mind, how that then switched, that was just like, a lot of people want to say they did something, but not really do anything about it. Or it's like proof that they're a good person. And I think a lot of ways that sometimes in religion, I see people like go through the motions, but they're going through the motions because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And like, maybe there's a little bit of relation that I'm making there to it versus like, who are you? What are you actually doing that's good of sorts?
Yeah, I think there is also like a literal interpretation there, where there are people who will travel places specifically to take parts of or soil from religious sites,
sure.
places, the Bible, and even so far as like, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but one of my biggest pet peeves, and something that I just like when I really am laying in bed wanting to piss myself off for some reason, I will start reading things about like televangelists, right? And these people that like preach the prosperity gospel and all this stuff that just makes me my blood boil. But they will sell, and I remember watching TV as a kid at my grandma's house, and people selling sand from Jerusalem. Like, you know what I mean? On like a televangelist thing, like send us $9.95 plus shipping and handling, and we'll send you a vial of sand from Jerusalem or whatever. And I'm just like, I took it kind of as that, like people were just scrambling to get a piece of it because it was going to fill some sort of void they have in their life or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, totally. And I think that's like where I think about it too. It's like, that's, I think, part of what I think sometimes religion does to people. And I'm not trying to sit here and knock religion for everyone. I just think like sometimes I see that if you have a void in your life, you have to kind of fill it yourself. You kind of have to feel it is. And like sometimes in like with them taking things that's filling this void, feeling like they're doing something or that they're like somehow being fulfilled, but most likely they're probably not. It's just going to be like another token to make them feel like that is.
Yeah, 100%. It's something to they have a void and somebody's going to give them something to fill it, right? Right. So like that's unfortunately, I think, and again, not saying for everyone, but a lot of these people, especially like predatory religious figures, like the televangelist types and stuff like that, they absolutely are looking to take advantage of vulnerable people who are looking for something because of trauma, because of whatever that's happening in their life. They will, if they think there is a need, boy, they will fill it and take your money for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, and this is my PSA about religion.
Yeah. I'm sure. We're going in a different direction from Camp Slashers. That much is determined. Yeah, we're getting esoteric here.
Look, you voted for it.
You sons of bitches, you got what you deserved.
So moving on. Those are just some of my few takeaways from the party of sorts. So anywho, finally fucking Javier's character gets J-Law the fuck out of there because clearly he's like, you're in labor. Holy shit. What the fuck? Let's get up to my office. Whatever. All right. She has the motherfucking baby and she's just still like begging and pleading for him to just understand that like this something's wrong here. Like you need to ask them to leave, but he doesn't because he's still so obsessed with it. They're this like worshipers. But like I think in my mind too, when I'm hearing that and like watching it, I was like, there's still now this like narcissism that I see within like this character of him of sorts. But anywho, so she has the baby, and now because he's hearing that the worshipers want to see the baby, or maybe he just wants to show this baby off to them of sorts, she's still like, no, absolutely not. And what happens? She passes out and he takes the baby. And like in the meantime, they're giving them gifts and stuff like that. Again, I'm assuming symbolism from like all the different like, oh, baby in the manger type stuff. Again, I'm sounding like super assholey about like, oh, they're giving them gifts. But anywho, so this baby is clearly Jesus. So if we haven't caught on yet. Now, when mother wakes up and she realizes this is like split second, she falls asleep, baby's gone. She's freaking out. She's going through the crowd of people and she comes down and they're eating the fucking baby.
Yeah, it was bad.
I honestly felt like that was such a brutal thing, and I'm not a parent, but I am still totally capable of empathizing that, like, if I was seeing my child, Ian, I would probably go Rambo on everyone. But also, sidebar, body of Christ, let's do this.
Yeah, it was very much like, the baby Jesus, and it was God gives his, son to humanity. They promptly kill him. and completely misinterpret everything he was there for. And now they are literally eating his flesh. So it's this like transubstantiation, kind of literal interpretation of transubstantiation.
And I'll ask you guys this question too, because like the next scene being like Mary being called a slut, she's called a whore, she's beaten the fuck up. I had asked my ex about like his, like what do you learn about Mary after she has the baby? Because me as like from an outsider, I'm like, you don't hear anything, like nothing happens.
Yeah, there's really not much. And I think and it's not anything I've read, but I think there are other Gnostic texts that are separate from the Bible. So you have a lot of like the Book of Thomas, even Mary Magdalene supposedly has her own scripture and testament that she's written, but they're not things that are included in the traditional Bible, so you have to kind of seek it out. But I think you do get more from that. But yeah, as far as Mary, the mother, you don't, you barely ever see them again.
There is this is a completely different, so I started listening to this a while ago. And this is a great thing to kind of go through some of the, like all those, like, what do they call them? Like apocryphal writings or whatever it means. Basically all the like adjacent books of the Bible, that I kind of started going through a podcast that reads through all those, the ones that like basically didn't make the cut right into the Bible. And there is an enormous amount of like explanation as to, whether like it's some of the context that you have to read between the lines in the Bible to get exist. They just kind of didn't make the direct, the final cut, but
yeah, there's also ones where like that were left out because there's no record of like Jesus between babyhood and like adulthood,
30 years old or
but
whatever.
Then there is one text out there, I believe, that like makes reference to him as a child, and like I think he like kills another kid but brings them back to life, but they left that out because they just don't even want to show the fallibility of Christ like killing somebody. So
yeah, there's a lot of that.
So he's pretty much just like a 30-year-old dude living with his mom,
more or less.
Perhaps
his homies.
Yeah,
I've dated that guy. He's terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot that speaks to, like, Javier Bardem's character, like making the decision to take the baby from the mother when he goes out. Like, one thing I did like is they did not pull punches regarding the, how do I put it, kind of like the selfish, maybe self-aggrandizing nature of like God's patriarchy, I guess is a way to put it.
Sure,
like
it's very subtle.
They do not pull any punches on it. They're like, yeah, he is addicted to being praised.
Right.
And he will do things illogical against his best interest, against the best interest of his followers, of his loved ones, whatever, in service of his self-aggrandizing nature. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It also has that. I hate it, but I don't. I hate it, but I know it. But it has that nature because I guess to just jump to the end, he continues his work. So he has a plan. Right. He has an end game, and just nobody else knows what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I almost took it as like,
and he'll keep trying over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. He'll just keep going. He'll just keep trying, and he can't, like whenever they have sex and she gets pregnant, even in being, all knowing, he has to have known that is what's ultimately going to happen. Them having sex is going to result in her getting pregnant, which is ultimately going to result in her demise in some capacity, right?
Right.
So like, but he can't control himself, and he keeps slipping up. So for that reason, he just can start over.
It's always this reset. And that's where, like, I feel like what's just interesting about how it ends is, like, she's pretty much just like, fuck this shit. I'm running to the basement. Let's blow this house up. And you basically start from the beginning of again. You have another scene of her burning alive of sorts, and him putting the crystal back in its place and starting anew, and like creating, like planting the seed all over again in hopes that he can do better. And you can almost have that sense, like at the end, he's just like, he knows he fucked up, and now he needs to try again.
But then but the selfishness still comes out, because it's like, I fucked up, I admit it, but I don't take responsibility, because I'm still going to come back to you because I need something from you to start over. So,
but it's not the same person every time either, which I found was interesting, that I don't think I totally noticed in the first time I watched this. Yeah,
there was like an uncanny valley thing with with her at the end.
It was just a different woman. So it's
I
not
feel like it was her, but they
Long.
just changed it slightly. Is that true?
I think no. I think it's a different woman.
Oh, really?
Like,
I thought they just kind of like
enough.
Yeah.
I looked it up enough that it's a different actor that played that character, and I was just like, wow, you're a different person. So almost like women are always blamed, I think, in religion and all the time, like somehow women are like this succubus sort of character.
Well, like she's too tempting, he can't resist, and that's what, and so it's her fault.
Let me, like, maybe if we do this again, a different woman will fucking
I took that as almost like and again, might be a little bit of a stretch, but I almost took that as like like an analogy for like climate change almost, or something like that, where it's like God will start over on a different plane, on a different planet, on a whatever. Yeah. So this is scorched earth, right? But I can start over because I'm God, and as long as nature gives me a little crack, maybe it's 10 million years later, 100 million years later, but I'll start over. It'll just take some time to build everything back up, and Mother Nature will eventually help me. So like humanity is always destined to destroy itself, you know, be it through war, climate change, whatever. But eventually Mother Nature will push the self-destruct button, but God will wait until she's not mad at him anymore to start over, kind of, in a way. I mean, I'm being a little bit.
I think that's where the duality of it all too is, like, there's, like, I talked about duality as like the spiritual, but I think, like, in reading more about it, Aronofsky definitely had intentions of talking about this movie as relation to like climate change and Mother Earth and whatnot. But I think he almost told it through this lens of these biblical characters that more people could even understand. Yeah. And so I definitely could see that as well.
Yeah. The thing that it like left me with was like, what is the takeaway? And again, it doesn't have to be distilled down to a takeaway, but like for whatever reason, that's where my brain was trying to decipher. So I was like, what does this leave us with? Like, what is he trying to say about God? Is it that God is like good at inspiring, but not good at leading? You know what I mean? Like, so he's selfish. He'll always create this environment to satisfy his own, vanity. But they never really, they never really give humanity a chance. So like, I was waiting for that, like, be your own God, be your own leader message or something like that. But it never really comes. The only thing I notice is they do take care to show that humanity isn't 100% bad. But the only time I saw that is when that soldier, I don't know if it was a soldier, it was a cop or whatever, who comes in and tries quickly to save her. He's like, all right, like, I'm in here, I'm on a mission. Oh, wait, no, this woman needs my help. I'm going to help her, but he quickly gets killed. So like,
I almost feel like that, like, my takeaway is like, it's not necessarily like humanity's bad, but I feel like it's almost like humanity, you have one chance, and that Mother Nature will continually regrow itself and will continually come back. Like, the only thing that will ever persist is nature. And at any given point, if we as people fuck up and we continue to fuck up, we're the ones that are going to end. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from it. And I think it could totally be told in like this biblical sense, though, too.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that as a message, and I think that would be a good. And again, it doesn't have to have a moral. You walk away from it. So I'm not trying to like slam around.
But it is a movie that kind of does, though.
It seems like it should, but I don't think I'm kind of slamming a round peg in a square hole here. But like, what, like, humanity is never a character. You know what I mean? God's a character. Mother Nature's a character. Of course, the people that represent the biblical allegory are characters. But humanity is never a character. Humanity is like a setting. You know, there's like a set dressing that is decidedly negative. Like humanity is the environment that she is dealing with. So I guess you could say it's like a role reversal in that sense. But it never, to me, it never gives not an out, that's not the right word, but it never gives humanity a chance for redemption or even a lesson to be learned. Unless it's just a purely cautionary one. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that was what I had on that movie. And a positive note, which I learned in my research and like trying to learn more about it, is that with the movie they did do a replica of Rosemary's Baby, which I thought was pretty cool for the poster.
With the face looking up thing. No, I didn't notice that.
So that was cool. That was pretty cool. Besides that,
it's like so I didn't dislike the movie. I liked it over. I thought it was fine. I really liked the performances. I think the Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem and everybody like did as much with it as they could. I do feel like, and I didn't know this going in, and I'm not trying to be like hypercritical here, but I don't know a bunch about Darren Aronofsky. I do know that he is the kind of director that takes things and turns it up to 11. Like he's all about turning the fucking volume up to 11 and breaking the knob off, you know? So like it almost just was to me like he had this concept that was this like metaphorical, almost like art house type of film, but he couldn't not Aronofsky it. You know what I mean? Where like, he just like, he try. It's like if, you know, and this is unfair, but like I put in my notes, it's like if Michael Bay made an art house film, you know what I mean? Like it's just the subtleties, because this movie overall, like I said, performances were fantastic, but in contrast to A Field in England, it's just like, it's so heavy-handed.
There's no subtlety. It beats you over the head.
That's true.
I have a friend from film school, and they have a podcast, of course, because everybody has a podcast. But he was reviewing this film, and it's what led me to not watch it when it first came out. But he was so mad at it, and he referred to Aronofsky as a pseudo-intellectual.
Oh, that's a great... So, yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I 100% agree.
Yeah, but it's because, like, anytime he does anything metaphorical, and I've already stated before, like, I didn't like Requiem for a Dream, because it just felt like a big PSA, and this felt like edgy Bible school to me.
It felt like I felt like we were one step away from Kirk Cameron walking on screen and like doing some sort of like lesson or moral type of thing. I think if I didn't know Darren Aronofsky before this, I think I would have given it a little bit more of a chance. Or again, I'm not trying to make it seem like I didn't like it or I'm like hated it or something like that. But this inspired, seeing this movie and wanting to go out. Like I said, I watched some Ben Wheatley interviews. I watched some Darren Aronofsky interviews. And I never have watched him. I never heard him speak in person before, or live before. And it's kind of like, because I read a lot of people saying, like, pulling a lot of deeper meaning out of this film, which I liked. And I think we did a little bit of that just now. But then when I hear the director talk about it, it reminds me of when we were talking about Sleepaway Camp and we were like, are there deeper themes here? We can't really tell. But then we were like, does the guy who leaves the boom mic in the shot have the foresight to do those other things? And in my mind, I was like, does Aronofsky, who when I hear him speak, he drives me nuts. Like when I hear him speak, does he really have I feel like the performances were great. The cinematography was good. Like it's a polished, good, well done professional film with really talented people. But I feel like some people are giving him too much credit for some things that maybe happened incidentally. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be too harsh or anything like that.
I'm crying right now, guys.
No, listen, this is what we're here for. We're here to argue about the movies. But
You're here to make me cry.
And that's the other thing is, like, even though I didn't particularly care for this one or Requiem for a Dream, I think Black Swan's really well done, and also The Wrestler is really well done.
The Wrestler's fantastic. I never saw.
The Wrestler's great.
Yeah, I have not seen Black Swan, but I've heard similar things. Like I said, going to take the kind of trauma stuff up to 11, and that's kind of his MO, right? He's he's trying to turn things up to 11 and really and here's what I would have liked more about this movie, because I thought there were super effective parts. The building tension around the politeness and the discourse within the house of them pushing boundaries and stuff like that, I thought was genuinely effective and stuck with me in a lot of ways. But when shit went crazy, which it did, I almost wish he would have been. I almost feel like all these biblical allegories and stuff like that are almost disingenuous. If he would have just taken the approach of like almost an old school like exploitation type filmmaker and said, watch this, it's going to be some fucked up shit, you're never going to forget it, you can't, this is intense, and just played it up like that, because some of the trailers were kind of like that. I watched some of the trailers, they were kind of like hard-hitting, fast cut, hey, this is extreme trailers. I think I would have been like, yeah, you're doing it for what it is, but then when I hear him talk about it and talk about how he's trying to tell this grandiose story of the human existence and all this stuff, I'm like, but I don't know if you have the subtlety or the scope to do something like that. You know what I mean? Again, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm being hypercritical, but
yeah. I think for me, like, he's great with human drama, but he's fucking terrible when it comes to messages or like deeper meaning.
Yeah,
like
if this was just a story about a few people and it was like a train spotting type of story, and you just go extreme with it and just talk about that human drama, that'd be great. But don't try to make it as grand as you did,
Yeah, and that's what's great about The Wrestler is it doesn't have to really have much more of a grander meaning. It's a story of a person who's like a broken person.
Yeah,
and the drama between Mickey Rourke and Marissa Tomei is great. And so, yeah, it's a great movie that way. But like anytime he tries to do something bigger.
Yeah. Scenes like in The Wrestler where he's working at the deli, like that is such an effective scene, but it's a tight, personal, small scale scene. Like that human drama is where he absolutely excels.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they would have just taken this movie and turned it into like a Strangers-esque or like cultish type of thing where there's these people who are kind of stalking the husband, Javier Bardem's character, and his vanity makes them susceptible. And you know what? You can keep some of that biblical stuff in there if you want, but if you made it more grounded, it had the potential to be really great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it may just come down to like removing that very blatant early stuff with Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer of the obvious Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel story.
And give them a driveway with a car, please.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and just make it a little bit more realistic. I get it. It's supposed to be the Garden of Eden. There's nowhere to go. I get it. But like, if he would have just been more subtle with those things and made them supporting aspects instead of the whole movie, I think it would have made all the difference. But he's also a super celebrated film director,
right?
And,
sure, he's a millionaire.
Yeah, and I'm a dipshit drinking Penn Dark and talking about it. Which
he's a millionaire married to J-Law, so whatever.
Right? Are they married? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I don't know if they got married before this film or after, but I'm pretty sure.
I googled.
I knew they did have some sort of relationship, a romantic relationship, but
I'm here for the actor drama.
Yeah, I overall, like I said, I liked it. I would say the other thing, again, I wrote this down. I already alluded to, probably could have been. At one point, I looked at the runtime and I was like, "How is there 26 minutes left in this movie?" They filled it out. They did fill it out. I mean, there was plenty to happen at the end.
Oh yeah. Like when it's
all right. I am done explaining how terrible
it's not terrible. It's not terrible at all.
What do you guys just want me to vote for you?
Listen, I'm playing for keeps, Meg. Where all of a sudden Peckerhead Meg's against the ropes.
Oh.
No, but I feel like you guys all have fair points, and I think you're coming from it from a different perspective, and that's I think good about coming away, because I think coming at it from like a religious perspective, I think it does change the dynamic because of how it interfaces.
Yeah, we grew up with this shit and had it beaten into our heads. We're tired of it.
I was made to study this and then answer quiz questions regarding it, and if not, I would have been shamed.
I lost Sunday mornings and Saturday mornings to class.
Oh yeah,
Sucks.
and Wednesday, Thursday nights. I had to go in the evening. At one point, it was like a 3-4 day a week thing. So,
Ew.
Ew.
You guys want to know what I did on Sunday mornings?
Yeah, I
watch cartoons.
I wish I would have. Not that this wasn't something that was like my entire childhood, but yeah, there was definitely periods of time, years where my parents leaned into it a little bit more. So, we were there and was doing my confirmation classes and all that stuff. But yeah, if it's a part of your life, I could see it's different.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we're wrapping it up, did either of you guys back down?
No.
Or do we need to take this to the streets?
Well, I think we can go second choice.
Yeah, I think we're all sticking. Well, unless you're switching.
No, I'm a switch hitter. I'm a switch hitter here. Let's do this. I mean, I feel like after watching all three, I appreciate it. I think I'm going with Exorcist 3 because I appreciated so many things about it. So I did, like, I think even like while like leading up to this, I still like Mother. I think it's a good movie, but like I think when we're talking about this topic specifically, I could see so many amazing things about Field in England, and especially after hearing you guys talk about it, I can understand things even a little clearer. But I still feel like if we're talking classics, favorites, like really good representation of the subgenre, I'm definitely going with Exorcist 3.
I dig it. And I'm getting.
I mean, clearly that's 2 against 3, but like, I mean, Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to stick with the Field in England as my main pick. But if we were doing second choices, I would have went Exorcist 3, just because it's a much more interesting film to me. As far as like the way it's made, the performances, I think I'm sorry, but George C. Scott fucking tops everybody. Everybody from all 3 films.
Yeah, he's so good.
The way he moves from subtlety to like over the top anger to just like spitting rage at the demon. It's amazing.
I would argue, and as much of a George C. Scott fan as I am, Javier Bardem can do that too. He's fucking brilliant. He's so good. But yeah, I'm going to stick with Exorcist 3. I love that movie. I switched dramatically because I've seen Mother before. This was the second time I watched Mother. The first time, I don't think I was paying super close attention. I think it was one of those things like, I can't remember where I saw it. It wasn't in the theater. I don't think it was on a plane, but it was definitely like on in the background a little bit. So I don't think I watched as closely as I definitely didn't watch as closely as I did this time. Field in England. We were talking, Meg, when we took a quick break. Steve and I couldn't stop gabbing about it, but halfway through the movie, I hated it, and 3 days later, I'm excited to watch it again. So I really did like that movie, and that would definitely be my pick number 2. But yeah.
Man, I go from the top to the bottom.
That's how it goes.
I'm bringing the table definitely next time.
Yeah,
powerbombing someone.
So this. I want you guys to know that you are going to live to regret this decision, because I am going to pick an absolute piece of shit for you to watch for the next one. No, I'm going to pick. Actually. I have like 3 or 4 that I'm excited to jump in for the first mini-sode after this, and just get real weird with it. Just get super weird with it.
I'm so excited because I feel like this is all your brainchild, and I feel like ultimately this is what you've been waiting for.
I will not lie. I have been waiting to make you guys watch something real stupid, real dumb.
Real stupid, great.
Yeah. So, well, this was Yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was there was a lot to discuss in this movies, and boy, did we discuss the shit out of it. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. And once again, we'll join you next Monday for another mini-sode. And what we're going to do is we're going to discuss a movie that I get to pick, and I'm going to make it a surprise because I haven't decided yet. But it's going to be like one of three, and it's going to be wild. So we'll do that on the next mini-sode. We'll also probably on the next one after that, we'll talk about what our potential topics for our next main episode are going to be. And then we'll spin that wheel, figure out what they're going to be, and then we'll put them out on social media. So please come check us out on at Halloween is Forever on Instagram, or at Hallow Forever on Twitter, or Facebook page. We'll probably pop some sort of quiz on the Facebook page this time at Halloween is Forever, or I said, shoot us a note if you got any suggestions at HalloweenIsForeverPod@gmail.com. So that being said, appreciate it. Hope you had a good time for the Halloween is Forever crew. I'm Brian.
I'm Megan.
I'm Steve.
We'll talk to you next time. Bye.